Chapter 900. What Rinpoche said was like a fantasy story to them. In comparison, the novels on the streets were much more realistic. Some books that made people blush with embarrassment didn't count. You'll know the specifics when we enter the palace. Rinpoche briefly explained the situation. He mainly talked about the conflict, defeat, and agreement between the human race and the foreign races. After that, he talked about the foreign races that they had encountered in the 60,000 mountains. Li Yuanzhu listened calmly, but her heart was in turmoil. After a while he composed himself and sighed. It's really amazing. For such a big thing, I have to verify it myself. That's why I said it's in the palace. If he wanted to confirm more, he could only head to the 60,000 mountains. However, that will have to wait for a while. I will show you a big treasure in half a month. Rinpoche laughed. Li Yuanzhu and Ning Qing felt a little strange when they heard what he said. However, the former still nodded slightly in agreement. It didn't take long for the messenger to return, and Rinpoche brought both of them into the palace. The Empress sat at the seat of honor in one of the side halls. She leaned on the armrest and held a waha in one hand. Rinpoche felt that his hard work was still effective. The Empress was used to drinking. In fact, those kinds of alcohol couldn't make her drunk. Now that she had drunk a lot of waha, she didn't drink as much alcohol. Yesterday, Rinpoche saw that 1/3 of the wine bottle was left. In other words, the Empress had only drunk slightly more than 1.5 bottles. He felt that this was a huge improvement. Your Majesty. Rinpoche cupped his hands and walked over to the Empress. You are still as graceful as ever since we parted. Li Yuanzhu cupped her hands at the Empress. The Empress sat on top and looked down at Li Yuanzhu. It felt pretty good. However, he couldn't mistreat someone who stood shoulder to shoulder with him. Men, take a seat. The people below didn't recognize you just now. Please don't blame them. The Water Empress said lightly. When the two most powerful women in the world met, there wasn't much conflict. Previously, Li Yuanzhu didn't take advantage of the Empress when she was extremely weak, and even sat down for a chat. This made the Empress have a good impression of her. He also owed her a favor. Otherwise, a mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers, even if there were 2 tigresses. That letter was written by me. I thought it was interesting. To be able to deceive you, the 3rd most powerful expert in the world, is indeed interesting. However, if it weren't for that, it would be rare for us to meet even though we are thousands of miles apart. The Water Empress said frankly. It's indeed a little unexpected. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. When she first came in, the hall was still a little cold, but after a few words, both of them had smiles on their faces. Call me by my name. It seems like you don't know how to address me. Calling me Your Majesty isn't suitable for a person like you. Just call me by my name. This was the first time the Empress allowed someone to call her by her name. I won't stand on ceremony then, she said immediately. What have you seen and heard along the way? The Empress asked. This is somewhat unexpected. Compared to the current situation in Great Xia, it is much better. Although it was poor, the people were passionate. I've heard some things along the way. I can tell that Deyo will become even more prosperous in a few years. However, I don't know about the situation in the Yin nation. I know what you want to say. The Empress waved her hand and said. Did he tell you? The Aboriginals are one with you, and I treat them as my people. As long as they don't anger me, I will let them live in peace. That's for the best. Li Yuanzhu smiled and said. On behalf of the people of the Yun nation, I thank you. The people are my people, and you don't have to thank me on their behalf. How I treat them will be known in the future. That was rude of me. Li Yuanzhu's expression didn't change, but Ning Qing was indignant. If it wasn't for the fact that this was her first time in a place like the palace, and she was affected by the atmosphere, this girl would have jumped up. I don't mean anything by this. You are a kind-hearted person. It's not appropriate to say that you are broad-minded, but it's good to say that you are compassionate towards the people. The Empress chuckled. Seeing that the two of them were talking harmoniously, Rinpoche was relieved. He was really afraid that they would go against each other. After all, they were women. Your Majesty, let's go take a look at the underground palace first, Rinpoche said after the two of them chatted for a while. Oh, let's go then. Lead the way. As the Empress said this, she got up and walked down with Rinpoche. When they arrived at the original location of the palace, the ground had already been flattened, and a large hall was built on top of it with bricks and tiles. However, it wasn't over yet. After entering the hall, they could see a staircase leading downwards on one side. This is the place. Rinpoche picked up a torch from the side and led the way down. What is this place? You will know in a while. As they walked through the passageway, Li Yuanzhu looked at the map on the wall beside them, but couldn't see anything. However, the white jade under their feet surprised them a little. The feathered snake that had turned into ashes at the front gate was put in a bag by Rinpoche and sent back to Earth. Unfortunately, no results were found. After entering the gate, the scene before them suddenly unfolded. The stone bridge, the earthine spring water that was emitting cold air, and the glass cover that stood erect on the ground that looked like an isolated island. That person's skeleton had been covered by the glass cover. It looked like a museum, but Rinpoche had no intention of collecting entrance fees. Rinpoche stepped onto the bridge and walked forward without stopping. Before long, Li Yuanzhu, who was behind him, suddenly stopped moving. Senior sister? Ningqing immediately noticed her abnormality. Sure enough, the man-wheel level can't be seen, and the earth wheel level is the basic level. Rinpoche nodded. Unfortunately, we can only see it once. What kind of mechanism is this? Only first-timers can see it? Rinpoche was a little curious about this matter. However, the Empress couldn't answer this question. Earth's current technology couldn't do anything about this kind of spiritual thing. What did you do to her? What happened to my senior? Ningqing glared at them. Don't be impatient. Rinpoche pressed his hand down. Don't worry, I just saw something. In less than 10 seconds, Li Yuanzhu suddenly moved, raised her hand, and pointed at the air. Chi. The air was visibly cut open by this finger. After pointing, Li Yuanzhu took 3 steps back. Her eyes became clear, and she looked around cautiously. She saw Ningqing, Qi Zixiao, and Rinpoche looking at her in front. She immediately reacted and said, "What I saw just now was the scene from back then," Rinpoche said. "It's really amazing." Li Yuanzhu nodded slightly and sounded solemn. Rinpoche turned to look at the corpse in front of him and said, "This is the senior of the human race from back then." Li Yuanzhu walked to his side and cupped her hands as a form of greeting. Seeing that her senior was fine, Ningqing was relieved and asked curiously, "Senior, what did you see?" "I saw our ancestors fighting for the survival of our race," Li Yuanzhu replied softly. After seeing the illusion, the rest was easier to handle. After returning to the hall, Li Yuanzhu asked, "Do you want to return to that world?" She was talking to Qi Zixiao. "It's mine. Of course, I have to take it back." The Empress took it for granted. "There's no hope of success. If I do as you say, it will only bring disaster. That will depend on my big baby." Rinpoche laughed. The Empress glared at him. Li Yuanzhu couldn't tell, but she, who had experienced the TV dramas on Earth, could tell. Ouch, 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 ouch. Rinpoche's face turned pale. The Empress pinched his waist, and Rinpoche gasped. Li Yuanzhu looked at their little actions. Although she wanted to laugh, she was more worried. Rinpoche straightened his face and said, "The two of you should stay in Lan City for the next few days. We'll talk about it after half a month." "That's settled then." Li Yuanzhu nodded. This was the only way. In this way, the first piece of the puzzle that Rinpoche was waiting for had been put together. With Li Yuanzhu around, it would be much easier to deal with the experts of Great Xia. In addition, if Su Wuming appeared, he would need her to help him block him. Let's talk about the problem of water. In fact, there wasn't really any water. Did you see the scenery that I described? How many words did I use? To describe the scenery and characters in hydrology, it was also a dialogue with water. A lot of things that seemed insignificant were actually useful. I can't keep pushing the main plot, and then make patches later on, right? For example, some readers feel that the industry on Earth isn't necessary, as long as it's a skill tree and a nuclear bomb. I'll just say the simplest one. 100 years in Dayo is 300 years later on Earth. Perhaps the interstellar era has already begun. At that time, Renbachian would want a nuclear bomb. At that time, they would already be in the universe and would be confined to the small area of Earth. If Renbachian and the Empress didn't have some power, who could they deter? Let's talk about Buddhism. Is it inexplicable? I think that a temple plus 30 degrees of stability is still useful. Furthermore, it has a lot to do with the character of Li Yuanju. If it really has nothing to do with her and doesn't affect the later stages, it can only mean that the plot of this character has been abandoned. Chapter 901. Gather in front of the palace at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning and set off with the team. Dismissed. Renbachian waved his hand, and the students immediately jumped out like alpacas who had let go of their reins. That's right, they jumped up and down. He still had to bring a group of students with him to set off the fireworks this time. Renbachian was constantly deepening the impression in the minds of these students about what they were learning for, and what they could do. Renbachian didn't want them to run away and become officials. Although the imperial court of Dao lacked such officials who had undergone basic education, he lacked them even more. He turned his head and saw the two sword masters standing in the distance. He greeted them with a smile and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting." "Your Highness, you are too kind." The two sword masters were polite. "Have you finished reading? How was your harvest?" Renbachian looked at the two sword masters. This was what he was most concerned about. Other than chemistry, everything else was all right. One of them said, "Other than biology, I got angry when I heard that humans were transformed from monkeys. Could it be that my ancestors were monkeys? Who is that Darwin? I must let him know the price of talking nonsense." The other sword master said angrily. The two of them didn't look depressed. In fact, Renbachian had already told them to pick what they were good at and liked. Darwin. I wonder if his coffin is still there. Renbachian thought for a while. It would be very difficult to let him know the price of talking nonsense. In fact, Renbachian had already gotten someone to revise the current teaching books twice, and erase a lot of knowledge about Earth. Ordinary people wouldn't think of going to another world after reading them. However, these were all trivial matters. Renbachian was more delighted. The two of them had brought back a lot of books. In addition to a dictionary that was written in simplified Chinese and this world's font, there were elementary school mathematics all the way to first-year algebra geometry, second-year physics and chemistry, and first semester biology. It was already very impressive that the two of them were able to memorize so much content in a month. It's a good thing that the two of you have gained something. It just so happens that I'm going out of the city tomorrow. Please answer a few questions for me so that I can know your situation. Renbachian suddenly laughed. Please ask, Your Highness. Come to the office. Renbachian brought the two of them into the office, flipped through the previous test papers, and marked out a few questions for them. 10 fill-in-the-blank questions for each subject were worth 40 points, and 6 short answer questions were worth 60 points. After 2 hours, Renbachian looked at the examination papers that the two of them had handed in with a look of delight on his face. Both of them scored above 80 points on average. Within a month, Renbachian was able to score more than 80 marks in a few subjects. This was simply beyond his expectations. It could be confirmed that these sword masters had an unimaginable talent in learning. Congratulations to the two of you. Renbachian smiled. Looks like we passed. Both of them laughed. Now we can talk about the specifics. Renbachian said as he returned to his seat. What the two of you have seen so far is only the knowledge that 13 or 14-year-old teenagers have learned in my plan. It's just a small part of the ocean of knowledge, like a small river, the kind where the water doesn't even reach one's knees. The two of them raised their eyebrows in surprise. They learned these things very quickly, but they also knew that most of these things were beyond the scope of a scholar. For example, the so-called elementary school textbooks were fine, but most of the algebraic geometry at the back was beyond what a scholar could learn. Not to mention the physics and chemistry. There is still a lot of knowledge to learn. I hope that you can learn more profound knowledge, and then use this knowledge as the basis for doing things. Whether it's doing research or being a teacher, the time limit is 20 years. After all, this knowledge can't be easily spread. If you want to leave before the time limit, the price will be huge. I believe you can understand. Of course, I will also give you sufficient rewards, abundant supplies, a stable life, and the materials that you need. In addition, as long as you can give me what I want, money, beautiful women, and power, I can also satisfy your needs. Learn the civil and military skills and sell them to the imperial family. Whether it's Great Xia or Dayo, it's the same. Your Highness, with all due respect, Lan City isn't the goal that we thought it would be. Even if the two of us are willing, others might not agree, Du Mingyang said. They didn't care about other aspects, but they wanted to live the life that they wanted in a prosperous area, and not spend the rest of their lives in a poor place like Lan City. Do you see those street lights? Renbaqian pointed outside. These street lights are really amazing. The two of them were very impressed. Even the capital of Great Xia couldn't be brightly lit all night. In fact, apart from those few streets, the capital of Great Xia was also shrouded in darkness. However, although those street lights could bring light, Lan City lacked too many things. You don't have to worry about this. As long as we have 5 years, the prosperity of Lan City will reach a level where people can live for the rest of their lives. After all, this is the capital of Dayo, and those street lights are just the beginning. There are a lot of vendors coming and going, and there are enough supplies to make people live a befuddled life. We can set up a 5-year agreement. If Lan City doesn't reach a satisfactory level within 5 years, your place of living will be moved to the Yun Nation, where you can have everything you want. Before that, there will always be a price to pay if you want to live the life you want. 5 years isn't a long time, Renbaqian said calmly. He was very confident about this matter. The two of them looked at each other, and felt that this condition was indeed acceptable. Furthermore, they had learned that Lan City had indeed changed a lot in the past 2 years. These included the street lights, the clock tower that amazed them, and the various items sold in the royal shops that couldn't be found elsewhere. It wasn't impossible to say that Lan City would reach a fairly prosperous level in a few years. As for the fact that the Aboriginals weren't friendly enough, the two of them didn't care. From some of the information they received, the people in front of them had put a lot of effort into this. At the very least, the people of the Yun Nation and the Jing tribe could walk freely on the streets now. The two of them believed that these things would change. We will only sign a contract with you, not the imperial court. The two of them raised another point. Renbaqian nodded. Sure. He understood their concerns. After all, he wasn't an Aboriginal, so they could naturally trust him on some things. However, they didn't have much confidence in dealing with the Aboriginal barbarians in the imperial court. Your Highness, how many people do you need? The more the better. It would be great if all the sword masters treated this place as their home. I can only say that I'll do my best. Besides, we need to go back and contact the others. If that's the case, I hope that you won't reject my men. As far as I know, the opinions in your organization aren't unified. Your choices may affect a group of people, and not everyone will be happy with your choices. My men are mainly responsible for your safe return, Renbaqian said after pondering for a while. Thank you, Your Highness. The two of them looked at each other and said. Although Renbaqian's actions weren't necessarily without the intention of monitoring them, his words weren't unreasonable. Renbaqian was in a good mood when he returned to the palace. The performance of the two of them had confirmed his thoughts. With this group of people, many things would be much easier in the future. These were more than 100 natural-born academicians. In such an era, such a group of people could play a huge role. If he were to abduct more than 100 academicians from Earth, how big of a role would they play in this world? Even if they were limited by their foresight and knowledge, their talent was their greatest strength. What others needed decades to learn, they could learn in a year or two. After that, they would be able to play a huge role. Moreover, dealing with these two spirit-will sword masters would open up a gap, and it would be much easier to deal with the rest. Another piece of the jigsaw for his future plans had been put together. Chapter 902. Before setting off, there was one more thing that needed to be arranged. It was Shui Liuxiang. From the collected information, this person's actions were rather strange. As a result, it wasn't certain if he was the one who sent the letter. Whether it was or not, the palace had to make preparations. If the true dragon blood was really stolen, it would become a joke. With so many experts, the Empress would probably fly into a rage if a thief could come and go as he pleased. The true dragon blood was taken out and placed in a separate palace with guards outside. This was to tell the thief that it was here to prevent him from sneaking into the inner treasury. It was said that this person only targeted his targets and wouldn't touch anything even more precious beside them. From this point of view, the thief was probably stealing to show off. Otherwise, a normal thief wouldn't be dismissive of a priceless item beside it. In addition, the thief had been in Dayo for more than 10 years without failing. Furthermore, he was still free and unfettered even after being hunted by the #1 super arrestor. This was certain. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made such a big name for himself. As a result, even though there were many experts in Lon City, Renbachian still didn't dare to be careless. There weren't many traps set up in the palace. After all, those traps had probably been used by many people. Previously, he had committed so many crimes that others had probably used all the necessary methods. In addition to the layer of guards and excianja outside the palace, there were densely packed infrared alarms inside. The purpose of the alarm was under the table where the true dragon blood was placed. The Roaring Emperor and more than 20 high-powered amplifiers in the entire palace. With the volume of the Roaring Emperor and the 20-ship amplifiers, it was enough to make the other party endure 240 decibels of sound in that instant. Under the heaven and earth splitting domain, even a deaf person would be unable to take care of himself for the rest of his life. A rocket launch was only 150 decibels, which could make an ordinary person permanently deaf or even die. An ordinary volcanic eruption was only 180 decibels. A sound attack of 240 decibels. Renbachian doubted that he would be able to see an intact corpse when he returned. For this reason, even the guards outside the palace stood far away. Remember, as long as someone passes through the infrared, no matter who it is, you have to play your part. Renbachian patted the Roaring Emperor's head and exhorted it. Well done. I'll find you a man-wolf female mole. Renbachian promised. If you don't do it well, then say goodbye to your little dick. Whether it was humans or beasts, coercion and bribery were equally effective. You may leave. Renbachian moved the stone slab under the table, revealing the tunnel dug by the Roaring Emperor. There were also alarms and loudspeakers inside. After leaving the main hall, Renbachian warned Exionjo again. No one is allowed to enter the main hall these days. Anyone who disobeys will be executed. Yes, Exionjo was still a person of few words. What if he enters the hall? Let him in. You guys stay outside. When the time comes, get someone to use a hook to hook him out, lest his corpse stinks. Back at Yahua Palace, the Empress placed a piece of paper on the table. Upon seeing Renbachian enter, the Empress pouted at the table and said, "The name list is over there. There are quite a number of people who have revealed themselves in the north these days." As expected, Renbachian said as he picked up a piece of paper and scanned through it. All of them had names on them. There were about a dozen people from the top 10 to the top 100. These people didn't hide their tracks and swaggered into Dayo's territory. Renbachian folded the paper and stuffed it into his pocket. Li Fu's deterrence isn't strong enough. The #1 expert in the world is asking for help, but there are actually so many people who dare to fish in troubled waters. Since the #1 expert in the world is asking for help, it can be seen that the benefits and difficulties are huge. Under such circumstances, there will naturally be people who are strong enough to come forward. If it doesn't work, they can just go back. However, it will only take 2 to 3 months. Can Li Fu kill them all? If he succeeds, you have to know that it takes many years of hard work to improve a little after reaching the spirit will level. Who would be willing to give up the opportunity to soar? The Empress said lazily. That's true. Renbachian nodded. What the Empress said made sense. If he was stuck in one place and couldn't make any progress even after many years of hard work, he definitely wouldn't give up if he knew there was such an opportunity. It seems like there might be more fish than expected. This was a good thing, but there were too many people, so he had to select them first. He didn't want to smuggle a few people in. The night passed. The next morning, The winged cavalry was ready to set off outside the palace. A total of 2,400 Earthwheel experts, including the Minister of War Qin Chuan, the Minister of Works Tong Jinye, the Minister of Justice Zhu Yan, the Minister of Rights Xiong Yaohe, the Minister of the Army, the Imperial Judge, the Ordnance Officer, the Military Weapon Officer, the Imperial Judge, the Examination Officer, and more than a dozen other Cardinal Heaven experts, including Qin Chuan, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of Ordnance, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of Ordnance, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of Ordnance, the Minister of War, 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 the Minister of War. Only the head of the supervisory department, Tai Yan, had brought the people from the supervisory department and the two sword masters to Great Xia. The rest of the people who had nothing to do in Lan City were all there. Apart from that, there were also more than 100 third and fourth year students. Li Fu Qingyun Sword, Zhua Cheng from Tianjing Basin's Lingshan sect, and Li Yuanzhu were sitting in a few ox carts not far away. Rin Baqian originally thought that she would choose to go by herself. After all, going with the team from Dayo would more or less affect the Truth One Temple. He didn't expect her to be so calm about it. Everything can be seen. If things are as you say, what does it matter what they think? If everything you said is a lie, I will naturally get it back. Why should I care about what others think? The number 1, 3rd, and 4th experts in the world, plus 2 spirit will experts, more than 10 cardinal heaven experts, and 2,400 earth will experts. Ren Baqian wanted to take a group photo with this team. It wasn't easy to gather so many people. However, after thinking that there might be more people in the team when they returned, he decided to put the opportunity to take a group photo until later. After the Empress and Ren Baqian's carriage left the palace, the entire team filed out from the west gate and headed northwest. Before long, Ren Baqian jumped into Li Yuanzhu's carriage, opened the curtain and asked, "Zhenren, do you want to play Fight the Landlord?" "What?" Li Yuanzhu, who was sitting cross-legged, opened her eyes with a puzzled look. "Do you want to play cards?" "Play cards. Great Xia also has a type of card game, right? It's similar to that, but the game is a little different." "Thank you, Zhao Prince Consort. However, I haven't done my homework for today, so I won't be accompanying you." Li Yuanzhu closed her eyes after she finished speaking. Ren Baqian shrugged. He originally wanted to take out the 5 Taoist temples in the Yun Nation, to bet on the Truth One Temple. Li Yuanzhu was really a boring person. He turned his head and saw that the Empress didn't like the rest of the people. Forget it. He would go back and play 5 in a row with the Empress. Forget it. I can't even beat the Empress. I can't beat her in chess either. I can try military chess. Chapter 903. They really left. Not long after the Empress and the others left the city, someone laughed in an inn in the city. The person who spoke was a man in his 40s. His appearance could only be described as ordinary, the kind that couldn't be found in a crowd. With a wave of his hand, a mirror appeared in the air in front of him. The surface of the mirror rippled like water being blown by the wind. The man took a step forward and passed through the mirror. However, if anyone was present, they would definitely be shocked. The person who passed through the mirror was a middle-aged man who was about 1.7 meters tall, thin, and had an ordinary face. However, the person who walked out of the mirror was a bald, short-bearded man who was 1.9 meters tall, majestic. There were few people in Lan City who didn't know the identity of this man. He was the Minister of Justice, Zhu Yan. This Zhu Yan waved his hand, and the surface of the mirror changed from rippling to a mercury-like mirror, reflecting his appearance. After observing this person for 10 days, I didn't expect him to leave with Qi Zixiao. However, it's good that it's convenient for me to do things. He left and then came back, so it's easy to find an excuse. I'll walk around with this person's appearance for a few days. Qi Zixiao has been in the limelight for the past 2 years, and has killed many experts. However, I took the blood essence of a real dragon and made her lose face. Zhuyan revealed a strange smile in front of the mirror. He then opened the window and looked around before turning into a shadow. Half a day later, Zhuyan entered the Ministry of Justice through the West Gate with Her Majesty's oral edict. There were many forests and hills in the barren mountains, but the soil wasn't good, so it couldn't be used as a pasture. It was also close to Dayo, so it had always been uninhabited. Master, there are so many people. A 13 or 14-year-old beggar jumped onto a rock and said. His dirty face had a pair of distinct black and white eyes, and his every move seemed weird. There was obviously no one in the surrounding 50 kilometers, but this little beggar said there were so many people. An old beggar with white hair and beard lying on a rock laughed and said, there are indeed a lot. Ma Hongyu of Rivers and Mountains, Su Gongso of Palm, Lin Dong of Righteous Sect, Du Qian of Cloud Covering Hand, Xiao Linyue of Jade Wave, Old Devil of Blood Sea, Taoist Priest White Cloud, Gao Yi of Spear, Gao Yi of Long and Short Spear, Law of Words, Tao Qian of Fire Snake. The little beggar counted with his fingers. If there are only a few dozen people within 100 li, it will be a barren mountain. However, if there were so many people within a radius of 50 kilometers, it would be a little crowded. It wasn't just crowded, it was bustling. Moreover, they didn't come alone. Just yesterday, Blood Sea Old Devil and Fire Snake Tao Qian had even fought. Master, are you going to snatch things from these people? Are you nervous? If you get beaten up, I won't be able to carry you. I've really doted on you all these years for nothing. The old beggar rolled his eyes. My butt hurts. The little beggar rubbed his butt with a bitter face. Who asked you to sneak out to watch the fight between Blood Sea Demon and Fire Snake yesterday? I'll have to find another disciple if the aftershocks come. The old beggar snorted. He then said, I'm just here to watch the show. As for the treasures, whoever wants to snatch them can do so. There are still 3 days left. Looking at the time, those barbarians should be here by now. This is their territory, so why wouldn't they come? When the time comes, I'm afraid there will be a chaotic battle. If the situation isn't right, you'd better be smart and run as fast as you can. Don't worry, Master. If they don't look carefully, they won't be able to see me at all. As the little beggar spoke, his figure flashed and landed under the rock. He twisted his body and looked around. There was no one there at all, only a withered tree. Don't show off that little trick of yours. Even your grandfather can't do anything about the aftershocks, let alone you. The old beggar snorted, then turned his head to look at a mountain not far away. This was the only mountain within a radius of 50 kilometers. Although it wasn't very tall, it had the best view. However, there wasn't a single person on this mountain that had the best view. That was the position of the world's number one, Li Fu, by everyone's tacit agreement. People would only go there after he appeared. As far as he knew, Maruyu Su Gongso and Lin Dong received the letter this time. As for the others, they were just here to watch the show like him. Of course, if there was a chance, these people wouldn't hold back. After another day, the old beggar, who hadn't moved for 3 days, suddenly turned over and looked in a certain direction. Master? Someone is coming. There are quite a lot of them. They should be the barbarians, the old beggar said. After a full hour, some black dots appeared in the distance, and after another 2 hours, those black dots finally came closer. There were thousands of people, and among them, there were more than a dozen tyrannical auras that crossed the sky and pressed down on them. How impressive! The old beggar snorted and didn't retreat. A gust of wind rolled up around him, and his aura soared into the sky. 1, 2, 3. A total of more than 20 auras soared into the sky and contended with the tyrannical auras that were pressing down on them. These people were also top experts among the spirit will experts. Other than the large sects like Zhengtian sect, which had slightly more people with 2 or 3 spirit will experts, the rest occupied their own positions. However, at this time, when the auras of both sides collided, a gust of wind rolled up in the sky, and even the clouds in the sky dissipated. The little beggar, who was standing at the side, was forced to retreat by the old beggar's aura. His eyes shone brightly as he said, with so many experts fighting across the sky, it's really a big scene. Rinpochian stood in the carriage and looked into the distance. Even he could feel the tyrannical auras and the silent collision in the sky. Your Majesty? Renbaqian turned to look at the Empress. It's enough to let them know that I'm here. The Empress wasn't interested at all. I just want to know what's going on with those flags. Which? Although Renbaqian asked, his eyes drifted to a few flags in the group. Thousands of years. Unifying the world. The sun rises in the east. Only I am invincible. The Empress glared at him and asked, Do you think I don't know who Dongfang Bubi is? Your Majesty, don't you think that Dongfang Bubi is a little similar to you? Except for the fact that he's a man. But at the same time, he has the spirit to conquer the world. Besides, these flags are just for fun. I admire this person, so I won't argue with you, the Empress said faintly. My Ren family's 72 Paths golden spear has been unrivaled in the world. Renbaqian boasted. Oh, the Empress sneered. Until I met your Majesty. Renbaqian's tone changed. The Empress dragged out her voice and asked, Tell me, who are your opponents? In fact, I have been sharpening my spear at home for more than 20 years and have never unsheathed it. Ordinary people aren't worthy of my 72 Paths golden spear. Renbaqian suddenly looked embarrassed. Umph. The Empress snorted and said, Pass the order to go up the mountain. As more than 2,000 people went up the mountain to set up camp, Qin Chuan, Tong Zhinya, and the others also restrained their auras. However, Tong Zhinya and the others had demonstrated enough, but the experts in the distance were dissatisfied. They knew that the aboriginals were overbearing. However, they didn't even go up the mountain, yet they dared to go up? More than 20 auras suddenly pressed down on the mountain. The Empress's eyes flashed coldly and said, How dare you? An aura that seemed like it could pierce through the sky met them head-on. Your Majesty, please calm down. As the Empress's aura collided with everyone's, another aura that was like the sea came in between them. Li Yuanzhu. The Empress snorted. Li Yuanzhu? The experts in the distance were shocked. Chapter 904. The fact that Li Yuanzhu was among the aboriginals shocked many experts in the area. They couldn't understand why Li Yuanzhu was with them. Fortunately, Li Yuanzhu wasn't with Qi Zixiao. Instead, she didn't help either side. There must be a reason for this. Although this surprised everyone, it wasn't too shocking. Night passed. The bonfire on the distant mountain peak was brightly lit, but the experts in the dark were uneasy. Some people began to secretly contact the aboriginals after seeing so many experts, but there were very few of them. Everyone present was a hero and didn't care about this. The next morning, hundreds of cavalrymen came down from the mountain peak. They were divided into more than 20 teams and went to different places. Sect Master, someone is coming for us. There are 5 of them, and they seem to be the winged cavalry. On a hill, unlike the others who were camping in the wilderness, there was a white tent. A man wearing a white cloak sat on a chair, surrounded by 2 men and a woman. Below him were more than a dozen disciples dressed in red. They should be the messengers. Lin Dong, the sect master of Zhengtian sect, was a handsome man in his 30s or 40s. He was gentle and elegant. However, his eyes were extremely frightening, and the whites of his eyes were almost invisible. Why did Qi Zixiao send the messengers? An old man stroked his beard and asked in surprise. Sect Master, can you guess what Qi Zixiao sent? A woman in purple with a mole at the corner of her mouth asked with a smile. Li Yuanzhu and Qi Zixiao are traveling together. Maybe Li Fu is also there, and invited us over for a chat. Lin Dong said with a chuckle. How is that possible? The old man was surprised again. It was already very surprising that Li Yuanzhu and Qi Zixiao came together. How could Li Fu? It's hard to say, it's hard to say. Another effeminate man waved his fan and shook his head. You only know how to say it's hard to say. What can you say? The old man said angrily. It's hard to say, it's hard to say too. The effeminate man didn't care, and continued to shake his head. The old man was called Zuoqi, the Lonling Blade, and the feminine man was called Yunzhongyu. There was also the jade-face fox Su Jiaojiao, who was dressed in purple. These people were the higher-ups of the righteous sect. They were the head hall's law enforcement elder and the left and right messengers. Not long after, someone came in with an arrow. The letter was tied to the arrow. Lin Dong opened the letter and scanned through it. Immediately, his eyes became like black holes, without a trace of light. It was as if there was only a black hole in his eyes. As expected, from the moment I received the letter, I felt that there was something strange about this matter. As expected. Sect Master, what did the letter say? Su Jiaojia asked. See for yourself. With a flick of Lin Dong's finger, the letter slowly floated towards Su Jiaojiao as if it was being carried by something. Where are they? Lin Dong lifted his head and asked. Have they left? Cult Master, they shot the letter to the tent and left. Li Fu was actually in Qi Zixiao's army. He even invited us up the mountain for a chat? Su Jiaojiao was shocked after reading the letter. What? Zhuo Qi couldn't help but snatch the letter. He immediately raised his head and said, Cult Master, there must be a trap. It's hard to say, hard to say. Yin Zhongyue shook his head. Are you going to go against me today? Zhuo Qi was furious. It's hard to say, hard to say. Yin Zhongyue continued to shake his head. Suddenly, his entire body became shorter, or rather, his head suddenly disappeared. It almost shrank into his chest, avoiding the sudden flash of the saber. Everyone stop. Lin Dong shouted. Zhuo Qi immediately withdrew his saber and said, Cult Master, this matter is a little strange. If it's me, just ignore them. Cult Master, do you think Li Fu is there? Su Jiaojia asked. Since Li Yuanzhu is there, Li Fu should be there too. Lin Dong said calmly. Cult Master, what do you know? Su Jiaojia looked at Lin Dong's expression and felt that the person in front of her might know something. This god's secret residence was a scam from start to finish. Their target is not the secret residence of God, but us. As for those people outside, most of them are just innocent bystanders. Lin Dong said. No matter how big her appetite is, she won't be able to eat it all, right? Besides, we have no enmity with her. Zhuo Qi immediately said. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. You. Zhuo Qi glared at him again. Cult Master, shall we go back? No, let's go tonight and see what tricks they are playing. Lin Dong's expression was still calm. Only now did a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Master, what should we do? They have issued a letter of challenge. The little beggar asked with a smile. What letter of challenge? This is an invitation. The old beggar immediately knocked him on the head. It's called an invitation, but isn't it still a letter of challenge? Why don't we just run away now? Anyway, you are shameless and naturally don't care what others think. The little beggar's words were somewhat sincere. The old beggar pondered for a long time before sighing. My curiosity. I already knew that I would die here one day. Your Majesty, how many people do you think will come tonight? Ren Baqian sat on a rock with the Empress in his arms. What's there to guess? The Empress replied faintly. Life has to be a little more interesting. Ren Baqian laughed in her ear, and then blew a breath into her ear. In the distance, Ningqing pointed at the two people on the rock and shouted, These two are too arrogant. They are actually hugging each other in front of so many people. It's so sour, and I have goosebumps all over my body. Senior, don't you think so? Senior? Ningqing turned her head, and saw that Li Yuanzhu was staring at the two people in a daze. Senior sister, are you in heat? Ningqing looked worried. Li Yuanzhu gave her a backhand slap on the head. Ouch. I'm wondering what their backup plan is. Li Yuanzhu said faintly. Won't we find out tomorrow? That being said, it's inevitable that I'm a little curious. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. After all, human strength is limited. I can't think of anything that can move people like Li Fu and the many people outside the mountain. However, they look very confident and aren't worried at all, so I'm a little curious. Anyway, they won't tell you, right? Ningqing spread her hands. So don't think about it. You and I will point at those two people together. In broad daylight, under the watchful eyes of thousands of people, they don't seem to be ashamed at all. Li Yuanzhu rolled her eyes. For people like them, what did other people's gazes matter? Besides, they were husband and wife. In the evening, the winged cavalry warriors on the mountain began to retreat down the mountain, leaving only dozens of bonfires and a few tents on the mountain. Ren Baqian took a few iron awls and roasted some meat over the bonfire. The meat was brought from the palace and had been frozen along the way. It was just the right time to use it, and the aroma of the roasted meat could be smelled soon. Hey kid, you have done so many things in my name, but I don't want any benefits from you. Just give me half of the meat. Li Fu smelled the aroma from afar, and his stomach kept growling. In a few flashes he landed beside Rinpochian. Are you the world's most powerful expert, Li Fu? I didn't expect to see you today. I'm Mahong Yu. A clear male voice rang out from the darkness. Then, a man in a black robe walked out from the darkness. I'm Su Gongso. Greetings, everyone. After that, there was no more sound. Li Fu waved his hand and said, What world's most powerful expert? That's what you call me. I'm just an arrogant person. Oh, I didn't know that you were so self-aware. Rinpochian laughed as he sat in front of the bonfire. Kid, nothing good comes out of your filthy mouth. Li Fu immediately scolded. Why don't you spit it out for me to see? Rinpochian laughed. Lin Dong from Zhengtian sect is here. 4 people appeared with a piercing sound. For the next hour, people appeared from time to time. I'm Lin Yu. Greetings everyone. I'm Bai Yin. Everyone is early. TSK, TSK, TSK. I'm Shuehai. I'm Gao Yi. Around the dozens of bonfires, there were at least one or a few figures standing or sitting. After announcing their names, they didn't speak again. Rinpochian estimated the number of people while waiting for the time to come. There were a total of 19 people who emitted their auras yesterday, but only 17 groups of people had arrived. No one appeared until the appointed time, and Rinpochian knew that those 2 groups probably wouldn't come. As the time was up, everyone's eyes began to fall on Li Fu, waiting to see what kind of tricks would be played tonight. I invited everyone here today mainly to show you a treasure before everything starts. Rinpochian chuckled. Who are you? A man suddenly asked. Rinpochian looked at him. If he remembered correctly, this person was Su Xianxian, the chief of Luohua sect. He was ranked 23rd on the list of experts and was one of the top 3 experts in the world. He's Xiaoprin's consort of Dayo. The Empress's voice came from the tent as she slowly walked out in red. I've never heard of him. Su Xianxian said contemptuously. You're courting death. The Empress's face turned green as she instantly appeared beside Su Xianxian. However, Su Xianxian suddenly shattered into countless white petals. Following which, a loud laugh was heard. I originally had some respect for the world's most powerful expert, but I didn't expect him to be an ignorant fox exploiting the tiger's might. I won't be accompanying you anymore. Your Majesty, don't chase after him. Why get angry at a dead man? Rinpochian chuckled and stopped the ashen-faced Empress. He then looked at the others and asked, Is there anyone else who wants to leave? Is it Li Fu or you who is in charge of this matter? Me. Dayo? You can say so. Li Fu, Li Yuanju, do you have anything to say? Everyone immediately looked at the 2 of them. Especially Li Yuanju. Li Fu had always been famous, but very few people had seen him. Although he was the world's most powerful expert, everyone was more concerned about what Li Yuanju had to say. After all, she came with the Aboriginal team, and it would be a joke to say that she didn't know anything. Chapter 905. Everyone, the world's number 1 expert, Li Fu, and number 3 expert, Li Yuanju, are waiting here. Can't you wait one more night? Rinpochian smiled and didn't explain. There was no way to explain. When the time was up and the treasure was thrown out, they would naturally know what to choose. Facts were always more powerful than words. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, we will see the results. If you have anything to say, you can say it later. Are you the one who caused this? Many people looked angry. They didn't expect so many people to be deceived by someone who wasn't even a spirit wheel expert. I'm the one who caused this. Do you have any objections? The Empress stood beside Rinpochian and narrowed her eyes. The cold glint in her eyes swept across the field, and the chill on her body wreaked havoc. It was as if she would immediately kill anyone who dared to say no. Qi Zixiao. Even if you are the Empress of Dayo, you have deceived so many of us. If you don't give us an explanation, let's see how you are going to deal with this, someone immediately shouted. Just as Renbaqian said, Li Fu, Li Yuanzhu, and Qi Zixiao were all waiting here. Everyone knew that something big must have happened. Otherwise, Li Fu and Li Yuanzhu wouldn't be waiting here quietly. Although the other party wasn't an expert, the fact that he could make them wait here with Qi Zixiao showed how important this matter was. Furthermore, everyone had traveled thousands of miles, so how could they not even wait one more night? They were just a little angry after realizing that they had been fooled. Renbaqian smiled strangely and said, I will naturally give you an explanation for this matter, and I guarantee that you will be satisfied. However, I would like to remind everyone that it's best to evacuate the people within the 50-kilometer radius of this place. If anything happens, don't blame me for not reminding you. Awkward silence. Everyone was silent. A moment later, an old beggar disappeared into the darkness. This person was Gluttonous Duke, ranked 29th in the world. Leader? What kind of trick are they playing? Zuiqi whispered. Let's just keep watching. Lin Dong sat by the fire. Let them withdraw 25 kilometers away. Leader, are you really going to listen to him? Zuiqi was surprised. There's nothing to lose by listening to him. If they couldn't give a satisfactory answer by tomorrow morning, many of the people present would probably explode. However, from the looks of it, there's no chance for it to flare up. Lin Dong laughed softly. Everyone present had sharp eyes and ears. Even though Lin Dong's voice was not loud, it was clearly heard by everyone present. As Zuiqi accepted the order and left, several more people disappeared into the darkness. Next, everyone waited. We'll see what happens tomorrow morning. Renbaqian stood up and immediately attracted the attention of many people. Renbaqian walked straight into a tent, took out a walkie-talkie and said, Send the things over and do as I say. Then he returned to his seat and held the walkie-talkie in his hand. Many people looked over. Just now they saw him talking to this thing, but they didn't know what it was. However, no one asked. This matter could be investigated in the future. The Empress sat beside him. The two of them leaned against each other and didn't say a word. The rest of the people were even more silent as they were deep in thought. The night passed just like that. Before dawn, everyone who had left returned. When the first ray of light shone through the sky, everyone opened their eyes and looked at Renbaqian. There was scrutiny and curiosity in their eyes, but most of them were calm like the surface of a lake. The time was up. Next, it was time to see what kind of explanation this person could give. The mystery was about to be solved. Why did Li Fu and Li Yuanzhu appear here? What exactly was going on? Renbaqian got up from the ground, stretched in front of everyone, picked up the walkie-talkie and asked, Are they back yet? They just arrived at the foot of the mountain. A buzzing sound came from the walkie-talkie. Bring up the blue boxes, 1 red box and 3 green boxes. Open the other boxes on the spot. Everyone get ready. After giving his instructions, Renbaqian looked at everyone and said, Everyone, it's about to start. It's better to make some preparations before then. Otherwise, Renbaqian didn't continue. In any case, it was about to start, and it was useless to talk too much. If someone really wanted to look directly at the explosion of a nuclear bomb, they could only pray that their eyes were strong enough. In fact, for ordinary people in this range, radiation and dust contamination were fatal. However, for practitioners at the Earth will level and above, it didn't have much of an impact. Their bodies were strong enough to withstand it. Not long after, boxes were carried up one by one and opened. In one box, there was a set of equipment made of metal that included a screen and a few buttons. There were also 8 antennas erected beside it. This was a controller that could reach a range of 50 kilometers in this world where there weren't too many radio interference. In the red box, there were dozens of masks with black lenses for the eyes. In the green box, there were some white coats. Compared to the previous miniature warheads, Renbaqian was well prepared this time. Everyone put them on. Renbaqian first picked up the mask, turned around, and put it on the Empress's face. Then he picked up the white coat and put it on her. What are you doing? Everyone looked at him coldly. Do as I say if you don't want to be plagued by all kinds of diseases for the rest of your lives. Of course, There may be someone who is willing to be a negative example and show you the consequences of not taking any precautions, Renbaqian said in a relaxed tone. She first followed Renbaqian's example and covered herself in Ningqing. Renbaqian glanced at her and felt that he should give her an award for the best actor. Li Fu smacked his lips. This kid was actually so cautious this time. It seemed like this was no small matter. This kid had always been using crooked methods, so it was better to listen to him. Renbaqian did the same thing. Only then did everyone silently pick up the masks and white coats to check, and then put them on like him. Is everyone at the foot of the mountain ready? Renbaqian picked up the walkie-talkie and asked. Those things are all put on. All students, this is the last lesson for Year 4. And also an important lesson for the rest of the students. Next, I want to show you what a human can achieve. I want to show you what you have learned and what you can do. Renbaqian said slowly into the walkie-talkie. Many students at the foot of the mountain heard the voice coming from the walkie-talkie and looked at each other. They already knew what they could do. However, seeing that Yagüe was so serious this time, everyone felt that this might be extraordinary. On the mountain, Renbaqian pressed a button on the remote control beside him and stared into the distance. Everyone looked over one after another. In the distance, an incomprehensible anomaly appeared. A sun that had just appeared on the edge of the horizon jumped out of the Earth's surface in an instant. Chapter 906. Whether it was in the past, present, or future, the sun would never change. That was what everyone thought. However, at this moment, everyone saw the edge of the sun jump out in an instant. Such a change caught everyone off guard. Then, everyone realized that it wasn't the sun, but a huge light and heat that spread from a single point and filled their entire field of vision. Even though they were wearing masks, everyone felt a slight sting in their eyes. His skin, which was not covered by his clothes, could feel the heat coming from afar. Then, there was a huge roar that sounded as if heaven and earth were being split apart. In an instant, everyone couldn't hear anything else. What followed was the vibration under their feet. Or rather, the entire world was shaking. Violent air currents blew from afar, bringing with them a large amount of dust that spread in all directions from the center of the explosion. A huge pillar of fire rose into the sky, expanded in the air, and formed a towering tree made of flames. No one present could speak. Everyone looked at the scene in the distance, their faces drained of color, and their brains lost the ability to organize words. Even Li Fu's fingers were trembling slightly. Even he could feel his own weakness in front of such a scene that could be considered the power of heaven and earth. Li Yuanju's indifference was finally shattered by this terrifying scene, and her face was full of disbelief. Everyone on the mountain, and at the foot of the mountain, stared blankly at the scene, feeling the power brought by the air currents from afar with their bodies. The ground was shaking, and the wind was blowing. However, no one could hear or see anything other than the fireball in the distance. Li Fu, Li Yuanju, Ma Hongyu, Lin Dong, Su Gongso, White Cloud Taoist, Bloodsea Old Ghost. Every one of them had a resounding reputation, and was looked up to by everyone. However, at this moment, when they saw the apocalyptic scene in the distance, everyone who was shocked by this scene felt a shudder from the depths of their hearts. What exactly was this? What exactly was this power that seemed like a god's wrath and could destroy the world? Qinchuan Tongzhinya, Zhuyan Feng Ho Lian Liang. All the aboriginal experts looked into the distance in horror. Was this what Zhao Prince Consort wanted them to see? It seemed a little familiar. When Zhao Prince Consort sparred with someone previously, there was an explosion at the end. In the eyes of the crowd, that was not a small amount of power, but compared to the current situation, it was not worth comparing at all. It was like comparing a firefly to the sun. That time, it was at most an all-out attack from a spirit will expert. This time, however, it was an attack that could destroy the world. Tong Lan's small body was wrapped up tightly. The tremors on the ground caused the surrounding stones to jump up and down. The strong wind blew on her body, but she couldn't feel it at all. The delicate little face behind the mask was completely lifeless at this moment. Not only her, but the other students also felt the same way. Although the things that Renbaqian came up with had repeatedly refreshed their understanding, This time, it was simply terrifying. This was beyond the scope of human power, alright? This was, after racking her brain for a long time, she still couldn't figure out what it was. There was only one question in her mind. What they had learned. Would they end up like this? For several minutes, the drastic change between heaven and earth lasted for several minutes. In the end, it turned into a mushroom cloud in the sky, informing everyone of the truth of what had just happened. The thousands of people on the mountain were silent. No one moved, and no one spoke. It was as if everyone had been frozen. Rinpoche looked at the scene in the distance and sighed in his heart. Sure enough, explosions were art. If it wasn't art, then the yield definitely wasn't enough. If a yield of 470,000 tons was already this powerful, then what about 7 million tons, 47 million tons, or even 470 million tons? What would it be like? No matter what kind of creature it was impossible to survive under such power. Of course, the prerequisite was that the other party could be hit. He looked around and saw that everyone was standing there like statues that had been petrified by Medusa, maintaining different postures. The Empress was the first to recover after Rinpoche. After all, she had been frightened by this thing in the past. I've finally seen this scene. The Empress couldn't help but exclaim. Back then, he had only seen the video on TV, but he could already feel the destructive power through the TV. Now that she was watching it up close, she realized that the power was 100 times stronger than what she had seen on television. When everyone finally regained their ability to think, they looked at the mushroom cloud in the distance and thought about what they had just seen. A sense of fear rose from the bottom of their hearts. What was that just now? Someone swallowed his saliva and asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it woke up the people around him. Everyone turned their heads to look in the direction where Rinpoche was, but they saw nothing. Rinpoche and the Empress were nowhere to be seen. When they turned their heads again, they realized that the two of them had returned to their original positions and were sitting shoulder to shoulder. Li Fu was silent, and his eyes were filled with shock. She forced herself to regain her composure, but she couldn't hide the horror in her eyes. Su Jiaojiao had long turned pale, and her body was trembling slightly. Everyone, please take a seat, Rinpoche said faintly as he held a cup and gently sipped the cold water. This time no one had any objections. What they saw in front of them had already occupied their minds. What was that just now? Gao Yi, who was holding the spear, was a man with a face like a stone statue. At this moment his eyes were still filled with shock. It's a big treasure. Rinpoche sighed. I have already said that I would show it to everyone. After saying this, Rinpoche frowned, his face twitched, and he turned to look at the Empress. He gritted his teeth and said, "It hurts. Can you be gentler? Did you do this?" Lin Dong raised his eyebrows. At this moment, he seemed to be the calmest person in the group. What else? Rinpoche asked. Everyone fell silent again. The scene just now had given them too much of a shock. Now that they heard Rinpoche say that he was the one who did this, they couldn't believe it at all. They would rather believe that this was the secret residence of a god. Rinpoche looked at the silence and knew that he had to strike while the iron was hot. He chuckled, picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "Send the other little treasure up." What do you mean? Everyone understood Rinpoche's words subconsciously, but they simply couldn't believe that Rinpoche still had this thing. After coming back to their senses, they found it even more unbelievable that Rinpoche actually threw this thing on the ground for them to see. One had to know that this was the power to destroy cities and countries. Even if it was thrown into the capital of Great Xia, it was guaranteed that not a single tile would be left. However, Rinpoche lured everyone here and used this thing just to scare them? How was this possible? This could only mean that this thing wasn't precious, at least not to him. Or perhaps he had a bigger plan. In that case, how much of this thing did he have? Chapter 907. Rinpoche had a relaxed expression on his face. At this point, he was indeed very relaxed. As long as they saw the power of the nuclear bomb, he believed that these people would make the right choice. However, before that, he had to give them a deeper impression. Sometimes, it was good to remain mysterious. However, sometimes there was no harm in making some things public. For example, how to make something like a nuclear bomb was naturally kept secret. Of course, even if he explained it, no one would understand. Renbachian hadn't even found the radioactive elements. Renbachian only needed them to know that this thing was very cheap. It was so cheap that he could throw away hundreds of them without feeling any heartache, provided that he didn't consider the environmental pollution and damage to plants. A cheap weapon of mass destruction that was powerful enough to destroy a city, and an extremely precious weapon of mass destruction. The threat brought about by the two could not be compared at all. The former was when he was in a good mood, and through one when he was unhappy. If he found you pleasing to the eye, he wouldn't throw this. If he found you unpleasant to the eye, he would throw one at your head to play with it. It was like using the rubber band of his underwear as a slingshot to smash the glass of his house. As for the latter, it would only be used in an emergency, and its deterrence was immediately reduced by a notch. If they knew that he had such a powerful weapon, they could avoid him even if they couldn't afford to provoke him. At most, they would take a detour whenever they saw him. Although the nuclear bomb was a strategic weapon, Renbachian wanted them to think that it was actually a conventional weapon. Renbachian faced everyone's meaningful gazes, and sat there quietly until someone brought out the other box. He opened the box and took out a metal can that was half the height of a person. He wanted to throw it a few times like a grenade, but he gave up after considering that this thing was too big. This is a small thing. Renbachian smiled at everyone. Was that a small thing just now? Everyone was in disbelief. How could such a small thing be so powerful? Although it was dozens of kilometers away, the explosion was too loud and covered a large area. It was as if the scene was right in front of everyone's eyes. Of course not. That one was a little bigger than this one, probably a little bigger than me. Renbachian gestured, and everyone felt even more incredulous. Even if it was a little bigger than Renbachian, there was a world of difference in power. He could even carry an earthwheel expert on his back. Renbachian hugged the metal can and began to twist his body. Then he spun a dozen times and used the momentum to throw the metal can in the direction of the explosion. Everyone couldn't help but stand up. All kinds of gazes followed the jar closely, watching it draw a parabola and fall down the mountain. It had only been a few seconds since they had fallen from the mountain, but it felt as long as a few hours. Everyone was eager to know, was this the thing they had seen just now? Boom. There was another loud rumble. At the foot of the mountain in the distance, the jar immediately turned into a small sun. Light, heat, explosion, and mushroom cloud. This one had a yield of only 60 tons. And it was the one left from the 60,000 mountains. Its power was incomparable to the previous one. The difference between 60 tons and 470,000 tons. But this time, the distance was dozens of times closer, and everyone could see it clearly from the beginning to the end. The shock they received was not small at all, and it was even greater. Many of the world's top experts stood there and looked at the flames not far away, unable to come back to their senses for a long time. Another one. Another one. Another one. This thought emerged in everyone's mind. It was still a familiar formula, and it was still a familiar smell. Although its power couldn't be compared, the power of this one was enough to destroy a city. Even standing here, one could feel the heat from the flames and the pain from the stones hitting one's body. With this kind of weapon, Dayo didn't need to expend any effort to conquer Great Xia. Manpower. Manpower had no value in the face of this kind of weapon. Ma Hongyu's heart was in turmoil. She never expected to see such a scene at the end of this letter. So what if he was a spirit will expert? So what if he had condensed a heaven-grade weapon? So what if he was a top expert in the world? Not to mention the power of the previous attack. Even this time, as long as one sensed it first and hit a certain distance away, there would be no chance of survival. How could there be such a thing in this world? Lin Dong's brows were still furrowed. This time, he was here to join in the fun. He was also the one who spread the news previously. The reason was that he knew much more than the average person. Some things that weren't recorded in other sects were recorded in the righteous sect. However, he didn't expect that he would be so shocked in the end. The commotion this time was a little big. At the same time, he began to speculate about what Renbachian was going to say. All right, everyone, let's get down to business now. Renbachian clapped his hands. It wasn't a very polite gesture, but it was like a teacher telling his students to pay attention. However, no one cared about this at the moment. Everyone suppressed the various thoughts in their hearts and turned their heads to look at him with solemn expressions. Even if he wasn't even a spirit will expert. Even if he was stripped of his title as the Empress's husband. After seeing this scene today, everyone had to be cautious when facing him. Previously, Renbachian had a rather widespread nickname in Great Xia, Poison Warrior. However, this nickname was nothing compared to what he saw today. Everyone, please take a seat first. I know that you have a lot of questions on your mind, and I also have a lot to tell you. Renbachian waved his hand. Don't think too much. It's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a bad thing for Renbachian, but it wasn't necessarily the case for them. What you saw just now was a nuclear bomb, a kind of technological achievement that you wouldn't understand even if I explained it to you. You have seen the power of this thing. If the power is divided from 1 to 10, the power of the later bomb is between 0 and 1, and the power of the earlier bomb is about 3. Everyone felt a huge wave in their hearts when they heard this. If a power of 3 was like this, what would happen if the power reached 10? Was what he said true? As for the quantity, you should be able to guess it. If it was very precious, I wouldn't have released fireworks for you to see. Renbachian laughed again. Maybe you will see it again soon. Everyone was a little doubtful of his words. If what he said was true, then the world would probably be turned upside down. In a few years, only Dayo would be left. However, the last sentence made everyone nervous as the incident from last night resurfaced in their minds. After Su Xianxian left, Renbachian said that he was already a dead man. At that time, everyone was disdainful. Unless Qi Zixiao or Hongwu made a move, how many people in this world could be his match? Furthermore, Su Xianxian's movement technique was one of the top 3 in the world. Unless he was forced into a dead end, no one could catch up to him if he wanted to run. At least, Qi Zixiao and Hongwu couldn't catch up to him. Chapter 908. I'm not saying this to threaten you. I'm just explaining something, Renbachian said after thinking for a while. More than one person felt that this scene was like holding a knife to your neck and telling you, I'm not threatening you, I'm just making an action. The purpose isn't too complicated. I just want to have a good chat with all of you, Renbachian said. Of course, it's also to give some people confidence. Li Fu's facial expression kept changing. He wasn't optimistic about Renbachian's previous words, but he didn't expect the other party to show him such a grand scene. Renbachian looked at everyone and went through their information in his mind again. These people were both good and evil, but none of them had committed heinous crimes. He was probably the kind of devil that everyone wanted to kill. He wouldn't dare to go to such a crowded place as he would be easily beaten up by the crowd. There was no need to mention the righteous path. As for whether or not there were people like Yubuchuan, that would have to wait and see. As for the evil Dao, like the righteous sect, although they had done a lot of bad things, Lin Dong could be said to be a man of his word. As for Old Ghost Blood River, he was neither good nor evil. In order to vent his anger, Old Ghost Blood River had forcibly fought with a famous large sect for more than 20 years. His reputation as a top-notch expert in the world was completely built from those years of fighting with the other party. In the beginning, he was still an Earthwill expert, and had a feud with a disciple of the Blood River demon sect. The other party used their power to bully him, and both sides had a feud. Later on, both sides clashed many times, and the conflict became more and more intense. Blood River Demon fought his way up from the Earthwill level to the Spirit Will level, all the way until he became one of the top experts in the world. Moreover, his character became more and more extreme, and his methods became more and more intense. Coupled with his martial arts, he got the name Blood River. Speaking of Blood River Old Ghost, he was quite famous. If one really wanted to list all the bad things he had done, it would be hard to count them all. The main thing was that he didn't have time to do anything bad. He fought with the other party every day. Basically, he would fight his way to the door, get beaten up by the group, go back to recuperate, get a fortuitous encounter, go into seclusion to cultivate, come out of seclusion to pick a fight, get beaten up by the group, go back to recuperate. This was the process. Rinpoche felt that he was fated to be the protagonist. With his past, he was definitely the protagonist of a novel. If it was someone else, they would have been beaten to death. As for that large sect, although it was still around, its reputation had plummeted. Everyone who knows about the past of the human race? Rinpoche asked lightly. Everyone was stunned, but there were 5 people in the crowd who looked uncertain. One of them was Li Fu. After witnessing the scene just now, he still hadn't recovered from his shock. When he heard Rinpoche's words, he immediately thought of Su Wuming and the scenes from back then. Li Yuanzhu heaved a long sigh of relief. Like Li Fu, she knew his motive from the beginning. Although he was shocked just now, he was the first to recover. If what Rinpoche said was true, then what they saw today was actually a good thing. As for the other 3, one was Lin Dong, one was Old Ghost Blood River, and the last one was a girl who looked to be in her 20s, Jade Wave's Xiao Linyue. Rinpoche was rather curious about Linyu. Last night, when the others were resting, she was the only one who picked up a dozen or so stones. With a pinch of her hand, a layer of dust fell off the stones. In the end, there were only a dozen or so cubes with rounded edges. She threw them up and caught them with the back of her hand. The first time she threw 1, the second time she threw 2, and so on. This little trick was very simple for a manual expert, but she played it with relish. This little trick made Rinpoche remember her. Another point was that there was very little information about Linyu. The rearguard commandery had collected information on some experts who weren't very secretive. Other people had a lot of deeds left behind, but she was an exception. She only made a move once. However, she definitely wasn't in her 20s. At the very least, she looked like this 20 years ago. Rinpoche refocused his thoughts and looked at Li Fu. Why don't you tell me? Forget it, you do it. Li Fu sighed. What happened back then had always been a knot in his heart. He originally thought that he wouldn't be able to solve it in this lifetime, but after seeing this scene today, he felt that it could be solved. However, it would take some time. He still had to meet someone. Chief Lin, Mr. Blood River, and Miss Lin. You seem to know a little. Rinpoche smiled. Lin Dong's expression changed. The human race came from Lansong. Rinpoche raised his eyebrows. He had never heard of this name before. There are a total of 10,000 tribes in Lansong and 237 territories. The human race occupies 10 territories, Lin Dong continued. After the war 6,000 years ago, there were less than 100,000 humans who survived the 60,000 mountains. Some of them were aboriginals who stayed in the mountains. The rest traveled all the way to Xuanyang, but there were only about 40,000 people. Xuanyang was the name of a place in the hinterland of Great Xia. After hearing Lin Dong's words, everyone was shocked. Whether it was what they saw or heard today, it had completely overturned their notions. This was also the first time Rinpoche knew the exact time. 6,000 years was a little longer than China's 5,000 years of history. From 40,000 people, it multiplied to hundreds of millions. Zhengtian sect was originally located in the land of Ansu in the 10 territories, called the Zhengdian sect. Lin Dong smiled at this point. My ancestors had already given up on the idea of returning. These things were engraved inside a coffin when I sneaked into the forbidden area when I was young. The patriarch of the sect probably wanted to bury this matter with him forever. Zuiqi, Yun Zhongyue, and Su Jiaojia were originally shocked by the nuclear bomb, but after hearing this, they almost vomited blood. Rinpoche's face twitched. In other words, you lifted the coffin of your ancestors? This was a profound meaning. Really lifted the coffin lid. Cough, cough. This matter is in the past, and it's useless to talk about it. Lin Dong coughed lightly. Anyway, this is all I know. Although this was all Lin Dong said, the shock it brought to the others was huge. Thank you, Leader Lin. Rinpoche smiled. What about the two of you? I used to fight with those sons of cheese. When I was recuperating, I accidentally broke into an ancient tomb and saw something similar to what he said, Blood River Demon said. However, there were some more scenes. That scene, oh my god. It scared me to death. When Old Blood River Ghost spoke, he even spoke in a dialect. Rinpoche nodded and glanced at Li Fu. Another person who accidentally dug up people's graves like you. It seemed like this group of people either dug up people's graves or lifted their coffins. He then looked at Lin Yu, wanting to hear who she dug up or lifted, whose coffin lid she lifted. He saw a thoughtful expression on Lin Yu's face, and no one knew what she was thinking about. The others weren't in a hurry and waited for her while digesting what they had just heard. Phehe. Lin Yu suddenly burst into laughter. She pointed at Lin Dong and said, "You actually opened your ancestor's coffin. He didn't jump out and hit you?" I'm dying of laughter. Everyone was shocked. How long is your reflex arc? Chapter 909. Miss Lin Yu. Rinpoche didn't know whether to call her Miss Lin Yu or something else. In any case, he knew that he definitely couldn't call her an old monster. He might as well call her Miss based on her appearance. Rinpoche inexplicably thought of the Empress. After 100 years he would be old, but the Empress would still have this appearance. He would have to call her Miss. What do you know about the history of the human race? Rinpoche asked. I don't know. I only found out after listening to you guys. Why are you asking me about this? Lin Yu looked puzzled. It had to be said that this expression of hers made her look naive and sweet. However, thinking about her age, Rinpoche felt that she might have been living like a dog at this age. Rinpoche thought of someone who might be about the same age as her, living like a dog at the same age. However, the two of them were two different things. That person ate, slept, and lived a pig's life with a clear conscience. Besides, according to the lifespan of the race, that person wasn't even an adult yet. However, the person in front of him was different. Rinpoche coughed and looked at her with a strange expression. When we talked about the history of the human race just now, I saw your strange expression and thought that you knew something. Lin Yu thought for a while, and then suddenly realized something. I was just lamenting that such a small thing could actually be so destructive. Everyone was speechless. This was no longer a problem with the length of the reflex arc. Was there something wrong with her brain? Rinpoche felt that he should get someone to check on Lin Yu's situation. If it wasn't for the fact that her strength couldn't be faked, he would have suspected that she was a fake. With such a brain, how could she have lived for so many years without being sold into a ravine? He put aside the matter of Lin Yu for now. Everyone, Chief Lin has mentioned some things before. I can tell you that it's all true. As for the evidence, Senior Li Fu has some of it, and Jinren Li has seen some of it. If you want to know, I can let you take a look. This is the purpose of this time. If the human experts continue to fight among themselves, we will never have a chance to go back. I hope to gather all the experts into one fist and support the high-end forces of the human race when we go back. If this was before, I wouldn't have passed on this responsibility. However, after seeing that scene just now, a person's martial strength is already worthless in front of such a powerful weapon. Gaoi said frankly. There wasn't any sense of dejection from him, but his words were from the bottom of his heart. Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. The upper limit of a martial artist is not limited to this. Rinpoche shook his head and said, "This place is called the Barren Land, the land of exile. Can't you think of why?" There were some things that were abundant in that area, but very rare here. Therefore, it was extremely difficult for a martial artist to break through. However, to be able to become one of the top experts in the world, one's innate talent and aptitude are extremely high. If there's a chance, one can soar to the sky in one go. Rinpoche's words lifted everyone's spirits. As long as one practiced martial arts, there was no one who didn't want to climb to a higher level. There was no one who didn't want to grasp more power. Most of the people who had come were here to fish in troubled waters. However, if one were to look for the real reason, it was to seek opportunities to advance. Thus, even with the name of the world's number one, Li Fu, as a deterrent, these people still came here because of a little bit of news. Therefore, Rinpoche's words immediately tempted them. After all, they didn't understand the strength of the foreign races, and they had seen Rinpoche's big treasure. As such, They weren't very worried about fighting with the foreign races. Don't think too highly of things. Back then, the human race was hundreds or thousands of times more powerful than it is today. What was the final outcome? Li Fu poured a bucket of cold water on them. As long as we take a step out, it proves that we have personally torn up the agreement from back then. As long as the other party attacks, it will be a massacre, and we will become the sinners of the human race. Everyone was shocked. Su Gongsa was surprised and asked, were those so-called foreign races that powerful? If it weren't for the fact that there were still experts among the human race who had the ability to fight to the death, I'm afraid that these 100,000 people wouldn't have survived. With our strength, we were just elite soldiers at that time, Li Fu said in a deep voice. Don't think so seriously. Renbaqian waved his hand. If Li Fu continued to speak, he was afraid that everyone would be frightened. You have seen my big treasure. How powerful is it? It's indeed terrifying. Li Fu had to admit. If I throw 100 or 1,000 of them down, even a god would have to kneel, let alone some foreign races. Of course, the other party's experts are indeed terrifying. None of us can stop them, and if they rush over, it will be a massacre. Therefore, we only need to ensure that we can contend with them in terms of high-end strength. Even if we can only restrain them, it will be enough. Since all of you can reach your current level in this barren land, why can't you advance further in that land? As for the ordinary experts of the other party, you don't need to worry about them, no matter how many there are. Renbaqian said confidently. Even if there were no radioactive elements in this world, as long as there was oxygen, as long as the top could restrain them, the middle and lower levels could be flattened with heavy firepower. Sigh. Li Fu sighed softly. It won't be so easy to advance further. Isn't there always an opportunity? If we can't go back, do we have to pass this burden to our children and grandchildren? The strong will always be strong, and the weak will always be weak. Retreating to a corner is just a struggle for survival. Are you all willing to do that? Think about it. There is a boundless world out there, a more prosperous land, an environment where it is easier to make breakthroughs, and a higher upper limit. Among all of you here, it is not impossible for some of you to be like the human emperor. What I want to do is to organize a group of people to go to that world to train. What you are worried about, old man, is nothing more than being discovered by them before we reach that stage and causing a disaster. What if we put an eye in the sky? We can see every move of the other party. The enemy is in the light while we are in the dark. What is there to worry about? Renbaqian laughed. Put an eye in the sky? Everyone was shocked by Renbaqian's words. Even Li Fu revealed a shocked expression. This was really a fantastic idea. Well, in fact, everyone wanted to say that it was absurd. How could it be possible? I know how to do it. Let us look down on the entire world as if we are in the sky. Of course, this will take some time. As long as we can do this, there is no need to worry. Can you really do it? Li Fu still couldn't believe it. When it's done, we will go out. Renbaqian spread his hands. Before that, we still have some things to do anyway. Your goal is great, Xia. Ma Hongyu frowned and asked. She had heard from Lin Dong that the Aboriginals and the people of the other countries were part of the human race. In fact, the fact that the Aboriginals stayed behind to defend the 60,000 mountains was worthy of respect. However, how could they easily let go of the people of Great Xia? No. Renbaqian waved his hand. I don't care about the land of Great Xia. My goal is to put it outside. As I said before, I need experts who have the potential to advance further. Renbaqian stretched out his hand and grabbed. Clench all the experts in the world into a fist. Everyone's faces were filled with shock. How bold was it to take all the experts in the world into one's own pocket? However, after thinking about it, it wasn't impossible. The number 1, 3rd, 4th, 8th, 9th, and 10th experts in the world were all here. Half of the top 30 experts in the world were here. As long as they were dealt with, the others might have a chance. They finally understood Renbaqian's idea. You said to put an eye in the sky. Can it really be done? A voice suddenly came from the crowd, causing Renbaqian's eyes to twitch. He saw Lin Yu's small mouth open in disbelief. Chapter 9-10. When everyone went down the mountain, Renbachian received a lot of attention. This was probably the first time that everyone didn't look at the Empress. Instead, they were all focused on him. Whether it was the court officials, the students of the academy, or the winged cavalry, many people looked at him with awe. It was as if they were facing the Empress. Renbachian finally saw such a look in their eyes. To be honest, it felt pretty good. After all, he had been looked at as a gigolo for so long. A gigolo also had dignity. Your Majesty, seal off this place. No one can enter. Pay attention to the situation here at all times. There must be many teams of people patrolling every day, wearing protective clothing, and they can't stay overnight in this area. This area is 50 kilometers. Renbachian whispered into the Empress's ear. So cautious? What exactly will happen? The Empress asked. It's hard to say. Radiation is harmful to the human body, so we can't use nuclear bombs to blow them up. If that happens, no one will be able to stay there. In addition, it may cause mutations in plants and animals. I hope there won't be any impact, Renbachian said after some thought. There was no one on Earth who did not know about the threat of radiation. Everyone, we will wait here for a day, Renbachian said to the crowd. They didn't make a decision immediately as they still needed to go to the underground palace to take a look. However, they couldn't get off this pirate ship. There were some things that couldn't be left once they heard it. Therefore, Renbachian threw 2 nuclear bombs and prepared to throw another one to give them the illusion that these things were conventional weapons. If you don't want me to throw a 4th bomb at your head. Of course, everyone understood that they were actually having an internal struggle. Don't think too much. Our goal is for everyone to unite against the foreign races. Other than that, there won't be any impact on you. Renbachian always spoke with a kind smile, which had almost become his signature expression. It was naturally the same at this time. Everyone nodded. Some of them stayed behind, while the rest flew off into the distance. Before going to Lan City, they still had to inform their disciples and attendants in the distance. Zhao Prince Consort, I have something to ask you. After dinner, Renbachian heard a voice. He turned his head and saw Li Yuanzhu standing in the dark. Renbachian nodded at the Empress, walked over to Li Yuanzhu, and asked, What's the matter, Zhenren Li? She looked into the distance and asked, Su Xianxian, how are you going to deal with him? Renbachian turned his head to look at her side profile, which gave off an otherworldly vibe. It was as if the Empress was looking down on all living beings from a tall iceberg. She, on the other hand, was floating above the world and looked at everyone with pity. The two of them had completely opposite personalities and temperaments, but the final result was extremely similar. She attained the spirit wheel level at the age of 17, condensed a heaven-grade weapon at the age of 21, and became the 3rd most powerful expert in the world at the age of 23. Now she was 29 years old, 2 years older than the Empress. Ever since she became a spirit wheel expert, she had fought a total of 42 times in front of others without killing a single person. The number of times he injured people was extremely few. Renbachian was silent for a while. He chose the wrong path. He hadn't paid much attention to Su Xianxian before. The scene on the mountain had also surprised him. However, there were hundreds of kinds of people, and experts also had different temperaments. This person seemed to be somewhat hostile to Deyo and looked down on Renbachian. When he realized that Renbachian was the one who spoke, he immediately mocked and left. If he could let such a person go, what about the other experts? Renbachian's thoughts turned into flowing water. Therefore, he couldn't let this person go no matter what angle he looked at it from. Luohua sect isn't a big sect, and they only have 200 to 300 disciples including handymen and maids. Su Xianxian was wrong, but the others weren't. Li Yuanzhu turned her head and looked at Renbachian with eyes that were as calm as water. Zhao Prince Consort, can you let those people go? Renbachian suddenly felt like laughing. In fact, he had a good impression of Li Yuanzhu, and he owed her a favor back then. Furthermore, she didn't say that he would let Su Xianxian go, and only pleaded for the others. However, at this time he wouldn't hesitate at all if the lives of hundreds or thousands of people could intimidate all the experts and let everyone see the truth. Unless I see Su Xianxian's head, Renbachian said resolutely. I'll go. Li Yuanju's words shocked Rinpochian. You. Rinpochian was surprised. One had to know that Li Yuanju had never killed anyone since she became famous. Now, she actually said that she was going to take someone's head? As you said, Su Xianxian chose the wrong path. I know what you want, and I also know that you can't be soft-hearted. However, if he dies and the others can live, then let him die. Li Yuanju's voice was full of inexplicable emotions. It seemed like pity, it seemed like a sigh, but it also seemed like there was something else. If Rinpochian were to directly throw a nuclear bomb at them, all the experts would know what to do. However, since Li Yuanju said so, he couldn't object. After all, she was the third most powerful expert in the world. Among these experts, the Empress and Li Yuanju had the greatest potential. Moreover, Li Yuanju personally killing people would have a considerable deterrent effect. Most importantly, Li Yuanju's choice had already explained her attitude. She came into contact with these things only half a month earlier than the others, but this ethereal woman made a decision even earlier than Li Fu. Although this decision made Rinpochian feel gratified, he also didn't expect it. After all, she had previously decided to go to the 60,000 mountains to see the foreign races with her own eyes. He didn't expect her to make a decision so quickly. It was so fast that Rinpochian found it abrupt. I'll give it half a year, Rinpochian said. I'll do my best. Li Yuanju's robe fluttered in the night wind. Rinpochian slowly walked away with his hands behind his back, leaving only a sentence that floated in the wind. It's a pity to dirty your hands. Li Yuanju stretched out her hand in front of her. Dirty my hands? In front of her was a fair palm with slender fingers that didn't look rough at all. Senior sister, have you decided? A person appeared behind Li Yuanju and stared blankly at the figure in front of him. I've decided, Li Yuanju said faintly. Isn't it too fast? Li Fu, Lindong and Blood River Ghost. None of these people are lying. The scene I saw in the underground palace has always appeared in my mind these days. Remember what I said back then? What I saw was the bloody struggle of my human ancestors. A voice told me that this was the path I wanted to take, and that this was my destiny. I was born for this, and so was Qi Zixiao and Rinpochian. Since that's the case, why delay? Li Yuanju said casually. It was rare for Ning Qing to not be talkative, but she looked worried. What Li Yuanju didn't say was that she saw someone in the scene who looked exactly like her. Chapter 9:11. When they returned, there were 60 more people than when they left. Some of them even brought along their own disciples. For example, Gluttonous Duke and Ma Hongyu. Along the way, the Aboriginal ministers and the world-famous experts traveled together. Occasionally, Qi Zixiao and Li Yuanju would chat a little. Qin Chuan always wanted to find someone to test the sharpness of his saber. Tong Zhinya, the old man, would look at those people every day with his eyes darting around. No one knew what was going through his mind. Lian Liang, as always, was indifferent to life and death. If he was unconvinced, he would just fight. He had never lost a challenge, nor had he ever won a fight. He had challenged several experts in succession. If it weren't for the fact that the other party respected Rinpochian and Qi Zixiao, his bones would have turned cold by now. It had to be said that although the ancient race's elders were powerful, their chances of winning a head-on battle against these world-renowned experts were extremely slim. On the way back to the city, both sides sparred many times, and both sides had their own distinct characteristics. The characteristics of the Aboriginals were their ferocious strength, tyrannical bodies, and straightforward behavior. The heaven-grade weapons of these spirit wheel experts were all different, and their abilities were varied. Furthermore, their moves were exquisite. For example, Rinpochian always felt that Ma Hongyu should be called Ma Liang. With a single stroke, the ground turned into a swamp. Green trees, boulders, and a rain of arrows flew over, throwing everyone into a fluster. Ma Hongyu's attacks were not considered ferocious, but they were ever-changing. It was impossible to guard against them, and they were extremely difficult to deal with. Su Gongso's divine weapon was a huge hand that was dozens of feet wide. When it slammed down, it was like Mount Tai crushing down, covering the sky and covering the sun. Furthermore, there was a set of sun, moon, and stars in his palm, which could be used to hit people. When the fire snake Tao Qian attacked, the sky was filled with scarlet chains. These people's attacks were an eye-opener for him. However, the Aboriginals had a secret technique that stimulated the blood energy in one's body and greatly increased one's strength for a short period of time. The Empress usually needed a month to recover after using it. As for the others, their strength didn't increase by as much and their recovery period was even longer. If they were to fight with their lives on the line and use this trump card, Renbaqian felt that Shi Wanya, Li Qianqiu, and a few other protector generals would be able to put up a fight against these top spirit will experts. Qin Chuan and Tong Zhinya also had a chance against the experts ranked below 20th place. As for the others, they had no chance of winning. Of course, if they were to face an ordinary spirit will expert, the situation would be reversed. Generally speaking, the ratio of Aboriginal experts was relatively high, and those who had just entered the Cardinal Heaven stage were stronger than ordinary spirit will experts. However, they were still at a disadvantage when it came to top experts. On the way back to Lan City, Renbaqian saw Lin Yu a few times. She always looked like she was thinking hard about something. Renbaqian suspected that she was thinking about the dinner yesterday or the day before. There seemed to be something wrong with this expert's brain. It wasn't until they arrived at Lan City that Lin Yu suddenly found him and said bashfully, Can I ask you something? What? I've seen your big treasure and heard so many secrets. Does that mean I can't get off this pirate ship? Lin Yu looked conflicted. Renbaqian looked at her and thought, have you been thinking about this matter for the past few days? Had he finally figured it out? What do you think? Renbaqian revealed a kind smile. The other party looked at Renbaqian, lowered his head, and thought for a while. He then looked up at Renbaqian, lowered his head again, and thought for a while. Finally he nodded and said, oh. He ran to the side and continued to rack his brains. Renbaqian was also racking his brains. He was racking his brains to figure out how this person's brain worked. Although there were hundreds of people and hundreds of experts, it wasn't strange to occasionally see someone with a hole in their brain. Even though it wasn't strange, ordinary people wouldn't dare to believe it. Would anyone dare to believe that the 20th most powerful expert in the world was like this? Renbaqian felt that there was something wrong with her cultivation, and that her brain was affected. He would wait for the rearguard commandery to send someone to investigate, and hope that there would be results. It took a few days to return to Lan City, and everyone went straight to the palace, together with the people from Qinchuan, and the court officials who stayed behind in Lan City. As a result, there were more than 40 Cardinal Heaven experts, which made those top experts secretly apprehensive. Although there were many top experts in Great Xia, they were in a state of disunity. On the surface, there were only 3 spirit will experts in Great Xia's imperial court. At most, there were a few hidden experts in the palace, and they were extremely few in number. However, Daya was different. With the Empress as the leader, there were at least 50 Cardinal Heaven experts in the imperial court and the 5 protectorates. It could be said that no power in the world could compare to Daya. On the way back to the palace, Renbaqian noticed something unusual. After entering the palace, the Empress ordered the people beside her, send someone to inform everyone that there will be a banquet at Zichen Palace Hall tonight. Renbaqian pulled Xianzhu aside and asked, have you caught him? Xianzhu looked a little distressed. Your Highness, I can't hear you clearly. I said, have you caught him? Renbaqian had no choice but to raise his voice. What? I said, have you caught him? Renbaqian raised his voice again by 10 decibels, and people in the distance looked over. Caught him. Xianzhu finally heard what Renbaqian said. Is he dead or alive? Renbaqian shouted. His internal organs have been smashed into pieces. Xianzhu shouted. The expressions of the people in the palace suddenly became subtle. He had never thought that loud noises could be so terrifying. In addition, half of the people in the palace had poor hearing these days. Renbaqian nodded. The roaring emperor and the loudspeaker were indeed a perfect match. I will take you to get your hearing checked in a few days. What? It's fine. Renbaqian waved his hand. Zhao Prince Consort. Great Elder Shurqin came over and put on a fake smile. I'm old and can't take such a big shock. You almost killed me. Also, all the windows in my house are broken. What do you say about this? I spent a lot of money to buy them from the royal glass shop. I'll compensate you. Rinpoche laughed. I'll replace all the windows in your house with glass. The outcome of this battle was a little beyond his expectations. Xian Shui was dead, and the power of his voice was stronger than he had expected. However, it wasn't too surprising. However, the windows in the houses of many big shots around the palace were also shattered, which meant that the impact was larger than he had expected. Needless to say, the windows in the palace couldn't be saved. Rinpoche put these matters aside and led the group of experts to the underground palace. When everyone came out of the illusion, they were all silent and couldn't hide the shock in their eyes. The scene in the illusion had shocked them too much. They were originally the top experts in the world, but after seeing the illusion, they realized how big the gap was between them and the experts. Just as Li Fu had said, with their strength, they were completely ordinary in that era. In comparison, they were at most equivalent to the current level of an Earthwheel expert. Then everyone became even more excited. If the experts there were so powerful, would they have the opportunity to reach the level in the illusion when they got out? Even Lin Dong, who was quite calm before, had a flash of excitement in his eyes. Rinpoche looked at everyone's expressions and smiled. Limited by his strength, he saw much less than the others in the illusion and didn't see the big battle at the end. However, he did hear about it from the Empress. Chapter 9:12. At night, Zichen Palace was brightly lit. There were hundreds of people in the palace, but very few made a sound. The Empress and Rinpoche were seated at the top. On one side were the ministers of Dao, and on the other side were the experts of Great Xia. There were two people with special identities on the side of Dao, Qingyan Sword and Zhucheng. In terms of strength, there was a slight gap between them and the others. However, they represented another group in Dao, the Jing tribe. The scene in the palace made them feel inexplicably emotional. A few years ago, they were working hard on how to build a city. They didn't expect everything to change in just a few years. However, this change made them feel gratified and a little regretful. They were gratified that Rinpoche's words were coming true. Those who joined the rearguard commandery were now scattered in Tianjing Basin, the Yun Nation, and Great Xia. There were also some ordinary people who lived in Lan City and walked in the same city as the Aboriginals. Although it wasn't perfect and there were still various incidents, the two were satisfied with this change. It was a pity that the many experts who died in Tianjing Basin at that time were here. If they were still here and saw this scene, they would probably agree with the two of them. Everyone, I never thought that there would be a time when I would sit together with all of you. The Empress played with her wine glass. In fact, in her mind, she imagined the scene of her meeting with the others. She would be sitting in the main hall with the heads of the people below her. Then she would say, suppress them under the plaza and let them become the cornerstone of Dao. This scene was very suitable for the Empress. We didn't expect this either. In the past, we would fight to the death when we met them. Qin Chuan stroked his beard and laughed. As soon as he said this, even the people on the other side smiled. Indeed, who would have thought that one day, they would sit together with the experts of the Aboriginals? In the future, we should let go of the hatred between our races and countries. Rinpoche stood up and raised his glass. Everyone, we are all two humans and for humans. The people below looked at Rinpoche, thought about him holding a wine glass in one hand and waving a nuclear bomb in the other, and quickly made the right choice. We are all humans, everyone said. Saying this was equivalent to making everyone's position clear. It was impossible for him to stay out of this matter. Of course, he couldn't get away from it before. Even Lin Yu, who wasn't very smart, could figure out this problem, let alone the others. The only strange thing was that this incident wasn't initiated by Great Xia, which had always been the strongest nation. Instead, it was initiated by Dao. Furthermore, it was caused by someone who wasn't even a spirit will expert. In their memories, it had always been Great Xia that accepted others. Now it was the other way around. The banquet was considered harmonious. Under the Empress's fists, Qin Chuan and the rest weren't able to obtain permission to perform a striptease or a real-life brawl. The Water Empress was also in high spirits, but in the end she drank too much. Furthermore, since his kidneys had recovered, Great Elder, Her Majesty probably won't be able to attend court tomorrow. Furthermore, the discussion that was scheduled for tomorrow can't be held either. Xianzhe pried open Shiqing's door in the middle of the night. Ha! Shiqing was taken aback. I did. Xianzhe nodded at Shiqing. If he hadn't asked her to do this and the Empress hadn't agreed, she wouldn't have bothered to remind him. After conveying the message, she disappeared into the darkness. In any case, she couldn't hear what Shiqing said. Her ears had been buzzing for the past few days. Shiqing heaved a long sigh. In the palace, it seemed like Her Majesty's Yahua Palace couldn't be saved either. He didn't know where they were going to move to this time. What? Postponed? Ningqing jumped up before Li Yuanzhu could react when she heard the news the next day. They actually postponed such a big matter, with so many super experts? They aren't sincere at all. Li Yuanzhu frowned slightly. They had clearly agreed on it yesterday, so why was it postponed today? She didn't know what was going on. Go and find out what's going on. Forget it, this isn't the Truth One Temple. It's better if you don't ask around. Others will ask around. Li Yuanzhu stopped halfway. Senior, what do you mean? Why do I feel like you are looking down on me? Ningqing glared at her fiercely. No, your feeling is right. Li Yuanzhu changed the topic. Ningqing immediately jumped up and bared her fangs, wanting to demand an explanation from her. In fact, at this time, the discussion between Qi Zixiao and Ren Baqian had been postponed for many days without giving an explanation. Many experts were unhappy about this. There were also many people who wanted to know what was going on, and didn't know if there were any unforeseen events. Otherwise, why would it be postponed suddenly? The Aboriginal officials didn't treat this matter as something that needed to be kept secret. How could a group of strippers and whistlers at a banquet be expected to think that this matter was related to the privacy of the royal family, and needed to be kept secret? Not long after, the experts who understood the whole story were dumbfounded. They didn't know what kind of expression to make. Ningqing muttered as she ran out to find out more information. After hearing from others, she immediately ran back with a red face. What did you find out? Li Yuanzhu looked at Ningqing's face and found it funny. Oh, how could Ningqing say that? Li Yuanzhu had a smile on her face. She felt a little strange. Although Ningqing wasn't diligent in her training, she was still quite good at gathering gossip. How could she not find out anything? What was with her face so red? Ningqing gritted her teeth and said, "They are consummating. It is said that they will take at least 3 to 4 days to come out." Li Yuanzhu's face quickly turned red. Shameless scum and vulgar. Ningqing gritted her teeth and scolded. He is indeed a barbarian. None of the men are good. Ningqing muttered angrily for a long time before raising her head and asking doubtfully, "Does it take so long? I don't think it's like this in the novels." "What novels?" Li Yuanzhu asked meaningfully. Her eyes were suddenly filled with an inexplicable feeling. Nothing," Ningqing said in a panic and ran out. For days later, Ren Baqian came out holding his waist. The Empress's palace had changed from Yahua Palace to Fenghuan Palace. Although he was holding his waist, Ren Baqian's face was full of surprise. This time, his hip bone wasn't broken, his spine was fine, his arms were fine, and his legs were fine. "We should celebrate," Ren Baqian said joyfully. After considering the possibility of celebrating a second time, Ren Baqian finally gave up on this idea. However, he was beaming with joy. If it were someone else, they definitely wouldn't know what he was happy about. That night, Ren Baqian went to meet the experts one by one. After all, he couldn't justify standing them up for several days. When he came out from each of their places, he brought a note with him. There was a note from Su Gongso, Lindong, Blood River Demon. Gaoi. Ren Baqian was puzzled. Was it a trend for experts to give people kidney supplements to win them over? Furthermore, each of them had one, and there were no duplicates? Speaking of which, why did a group of experts like you carry kidney supplements with you? Are your kidneys not good? This book should be renamed as Kidney Deficiency. Only Li Yuanzhu was relatively normal. It was just that her gaze was very strange. Oh, there was also a normal person, Linyu. After Rinpochian left for a long time, Linyu slapped her head and said, I forgot to ask why it was delayed by 5 days. Chapter 913. The experts at the top of the list had been waiting for the two of them to consummate for 5 days. No one would believe this, but it really happened, which left everyone speechless. Fortunately, they could officially discuss it the next day. First, the affiliation of this organization became the first hurdle. If it belonged to Dayo, many experts would be the first to object. Even if Rinpochian waved a nuclear bomb, and Dayo took the lead from beginning to end. In any case, it can't belong to the Imperial Court of Dayo. Although I don't have any feelings for Great Xia, I don't intend to become a citizen of Dayo, Su Gongso said calmly. I don't agree either. I don't intend to work for any nation, Gao Yi said. I don't agree as well. After all, the Painting World Villa is still in Dayo's Longjing residence, and all the disciples are from Great Xia. We are working hard for the entire human race and for our own future, not for Dayo. Ma Hongyu didn't even look at the Empress, who was getting more and more upset. The Empress sat in the seat of honor, and felt more comfortable with the heads of these people placed in front of her. Sure. Rinpochian grabbed the Empress's hand, held her back and whispered in her ear. In the future it will be interesting when they beg you to join them. Li Fu, Li Yuanju, and the others turned their heads and looked at Rinpochian inexplicably. Beg to join them? These people? Rinpochian took in everyone's expressions and sneered. Without Dayo identification cards, you won't even be able to get a phone card. You won't be able to get a bank card either. You won't be able to buy a house either. Well, these don't matter. You can be arrogant and freeload off the phone and bank cards of your disciples. However, it was hard to say how many countries there would be in the future. Even if they didn't take the initiative to occupy other countries, it would be hard to say what the other countries and people would do after the comparison between a modern and feudal society was made. The Empress took 2 deep breaths to ease the anger in her heart. We aren't doing this for one person or one country, but for ourselves and the entire human race. Rinpochian smiled. Hearing this, the others heaved a sigh of relief. They were really afraid that the Empress and Rinpochian would stubbornly classify this organization as a department of Dayo, which they couldn't accept no matter what. Actually, this old man doesn't care. Blood River spread his hands and said indifferently, If you can satisfy me, what's the harm in joining Dayo? The others didn't even look at him. If you want to, that's your business. Rinpochian responded with a smile. Although this matter made both parties a little unhappy, it was considered to have passed smoothly with Rinpochian's statement. During the lunch break, Tong Zhinya went over to Rinpochian's side, stroked his beard and cursed. Damn it, why do I feel like we are letting them off too lightly? We send them out to find a good place to cultivate, we give them food, but in the end, aren't they on our side? In the face of a formidable enemy, every bit of strength is very important. Especially these people who have the opportunity to become top experts. Now, as long as they are humans, they are all on our side. Rinpochian said casually. Don't think too much. Who knows what will happen in the future? During lunch, the Empress was still feeling a little depressed. Your Majesty, don't think too much about it. After all, this is only the first step. Rinpochian laughed. I really don't feel happy. The Empress raised her eyebrows and looked dissatisfied. After all, we've fought for so many years. Also, think about how they will use their connections to get a Dayo residence in the future. Wouldn't that be much better? Rinpochian teased her. The Empress shook her head and said, It's not easy to make these people lower their heads. Like you said, we are facing a formidable enemy. There will always be a chance, Rinpochian said. Although he didn't know whether his expectations could be realized, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Of course, he definitely couldn't do anything that would be a hindrance. History had already shown that dragging one's own people down would ultimately lead to one's own downfall. Even if he couldn't make them lower their heads and take the initiative to join Dayo, it didn't matter. At that time, Dayo's wings would have hardened. On the contrary, The current situation and the early stages of entering that world were the most important. In the afternoon, the first thing to decide was the name of the organization. Helping Children Go Home Charity Organization? Li Fu looked at the name written on the paper in front of him. Are you kidding me? This is... Li Yuanzhu also looked up. Am I right? Think about where we are going. Home. That is the home of the human race. All the people of Dayo are the subjects of Her Majesty. However, aren't the people of Great Xia also human beings? Furthermore, this child also includes our descendants. We don't do it for fame or profit. We just want our descendants to get rid of their wandering lives and return to their homeland. Do you think that's wrong? It seems to be right. Li Yuanzhu thought about it. It seemed to be the case and made sense, but why didn't this name sound right? But the name isn't quite right. Ma Hongyu continued. There's no other way. Everyone has their own preferences for names. It's just like eating, and everyone has their own preferences. Why don't you find a suitable name that can explain our purpose and let people know what we want to do at a glance? Furthermore, it has to be acceptable to everyone. Ren Baqian looked indifferent. When Ma Hongyu heard that he was being blamed, he immediately showed a constipated expression. Asking him to come up with a name was simply asking for his life. The Empress responded with a faint and unfathomable smile. In fact, she was playing the role of a bystander. They had made her unhappy in the morning, and now, it was her turn to watch the show. I think this name isn't bad. Blood River cackled. Everyone immediately glared at him. They couldn't be bothered with him in the morning, and now he popped up again. Was he trying to argue with them, or was he trying to argue with them? I think it's good too. Tong Xinye laughed. It's indeed good, but the name is a little long. However, a longer name makes it more awe-inspiring. It was rare for Qin Chuan to be on the same side as Tong Xinye. Tu Wan. Agreed. Xiongyaoha. It's indeed good. The Aboriginal experts immediately agreed. In any case, they were happy to see the other party unhappy. Besides, he was their Zhao Prince consort. Without the Empress's permission, who else would they support but him? Most of you agree. He chuckled. Since this organization doesn't belong to Dayo, it will be up to everyone to vote for it. If the majority agrees, it will pass. If the majority doesn't, it will be rejected. What do you think? Everyone's expression was one of utter disbelief. How could they do this? More than 30 of the 50 people in the room were Aboriginals. What kind of vote was there? Zhao Prince Consort's suggestion is good. Otherwise, with so many people, who should we listen to? This is still a good idea. Tong Xinye rolled his eyes and immediately laughed. No matter how stupid he was, he knew which side had the most people and which had the least. I don't agree. Su Gongso slammed the table and glared. Oh, otherwise, this organization is based on experts. If we don't have a constitution, won't we just argue about everything in the future? Ren Baqian said casually as he picked at his nails. You have more people. That's unfair. Fire Snake Tao Qian slammed the table and shouted. That's because we have more experts. Ren Baqian looked up and laughed. Numbers don't necessarily mean strength. Why don't we have a competition? You want to compete with my big baby? Ren Baqian chuckled. Tao Qian was speechless. As long as that thing was within a radius of 300 meters, it wouldn't even have a chance to run. What was there to compete for? That's why I said that we are still stronger. Of course, you can also bring in experts. Ren Baqian said faintly. Chapter 914. Tianming. Miktang? Pu Chang. Ren Baqian sat at the head of the table and watched with a smile as the experts of Great Xia struggled to come up with silly names, and then rejected them. Let's go with Zhao Prince Consorts, but we have to change it to become the Homecoming Charity Organization. Li Yuanzhu covered her forehead. After listening for a long time, she felt that these people's ability to come up with names was really worrying. Besides, this matter wasn't that important, so there was no need to dwell too much on it. Only then did everyone reluctantly agree. Ren Baqian also felt that this was a trivial matter, and moved on to the next item. It was about the structure of this so-called organization. A snake can't be without a head. If we can't carry out orders, this organization will eventually fall into internal strife. In my opinion, we can set up a leader and 2 deputy leaders to decide daily affairs. The others will receive different treatments according to their contributions in order to prevent people from not putting in the effort. After all, we will be facing an enemy that is 10 times or even dozens of times stronger than us, and we can't afford to make any mistakes. Everyone looked solemn when they heard Renbachian's words. The previous names were trivial, and what was in front of them was the real issue. As for your treatment, whether it is in terms of strength or as the initiators of this organization, your treatment can't be equal to that of other warriors. In the future, there will be all kinds of benefits in the organization, including martial arts that can be used for reference, better training locations, various materials needed for training, and even radio stations, unmanned surveillance drones, and tablet computers can be obtained from the organization. However, as I said, the specific benefits you will receive will depend on what you do for the organization. Renbachian said slowly. Everyone nodded after some thought. This was feasible. For people at their level, those things were no longer important. However, there would still be comparisons between warriors who were close in strength. There was no first place in literature and second place in martial arts. This had been the case since ancient times, and it was the same in other aspects. However, what were radio stations, unmanned surveillance drones, and tablet computers? There are 3 factors that determine your treatment. The first is the number and quality of the people we absorb into the organization. As I said before, this organization is for all of us. Our goal is for all of us to be united and form an effective fighting force in the future war. Therefore, we must absorb other experts into the organization. They have always been our goal. Super experts, experts, and martial artists with potential. Every person that was recruited would be evaluated in terms of strength, potential, character, and other aspects, and this evaluation would be included in everyone's contribution. The higher the contribution, the better the treatment. Moreover, when the war starts in the future, everyone will be able to mobilize more manpower. At this point, Renbachian laughed and said, "To put it bluntly, it might not sound nice. However, all of you need to remember one thing. What we're doing is for all of humanity. Recruiting experts was not for the sake of scoring points, but to increase the strength of the organization and the strength of the human race. If all the experts of the human race are in a state of disunity, how can we achieve anything in the end? After all, we've already fallen behind for 7,000 years. Those strange races are recuperating in our homeland, while we're declining in this banished land. We don't have any more time to waste. There's no more manpower for us to waste." Everyone frowned and remained silent. Indeed, as Renbachian had said, this matter wasn't pleasant to hear. Moreover, it felt weird to ask these people to recruit people no matter how one thought about it. However, what Renbachian said was right. Everyone was a force, and this was a matter for all of humanity. Li Fu snorted and said, "I can't do this, and I don't care about other things. I'm only interested in those messy things of yours and want to see if what you said will come true." "You don't care about other things, but you won't care if the human race is defeated because of a lack of manpower?" Renbachian asked. Li Fu's face immediately turned black. This accusation was a little too much. Of course, in addition to this point, there's a second point, which is to do missions, Renbachian continued. The organization will regularly issue missions, and urgent missions may be enforced. This is everyone's responsibility and obligation. What I can say is that every mission is for the sake of our final goal. Naturally, you can also get some points by completing the mission. As for the third point, you can also get points by donating resources to the organization. After all, such a large organization involves all the experts of the human race. We can't possibly make everyone pay out of their own pockets, right? Renbachian smiled rather kindly. This supplement was a big scam. In terms of donating resources to earn points, there was probably no one better than him and the entire Dayo court. Finally, let's talk about the use of points. In addition to the chief and deputy chief, there are also various levels of executors and other missions. At the same time, Ordinary members are also divided into different levels, ranging from level 1 to level 9. The higher the level, the greater the contribution to the organization and the human race. After Rinpoche said this, everyone frowned even more. They felt as if they were tied up by an iron chain. They wanted to refute, but what Rinpoche said was indeed reasonable. How can you guarantee that this organization won't become a private tool in the end? Gluttonous Duke looked up with a bitter expression as if he had eaten a yellow lotus. This will require a panel of judges. The executors are divided into 5 levels, with the lowest being level 1 and the highest being level 5. All executors above level 3 will become a member of the council. Every 5 years, the council will review the situation of the past 5 years and make suggestions for future development. In addition, this council has the right to dismiss the chief and deputy chief. If the chief can't lead the organization and the human race to the future that we expect, everyone can choose a capable chief. What I'm doing is only for the human race. As for the rest, I don't even care about Great Xia. If I want to swallow Great Xia, it will be almost effortless, but so what? Only the human race as a whole is my goal. Rinpoche's words at this time, coupled with the previous proposal of the council, were particularly convincing, and everyone nodded slightly. After listening to Rinpoche, everyone fell into deep thought. There were too many things that Rinpoche said that they hadn't thought of before. These people weren't stupid, and they were heroes after all. However, no matter what, they were limited by what they could see. To put it bluntly, they relied on their martial strength to occupy the mountains during the feudal era. At most, they were the leaders of a sect, in charge of thousands of people, and used the management methods that had been passed down. How could they beat Rinpoche in these things? There were many traps in the content, and no matter how they thought about it, they couldn't avoid it. The most important thing was that Rinpoche could obtain resources and materials to increase the proportion of aboriginals among the executors. Dayo was the entire country and sat on the 60,000 mountains. Not to mention, Rinpoche had a lot of technology that could improve productivity. These advantages were incomparable to anyone else. If they wanted to increase the number of people in the executors, they had to complete enough tasks and rope in enough experts. This way, they wouldn't have to worry about the executors not working hard. But so what? Needless to say, Rinpoche had left many traps in the structure of this organization. Even if they found out, they couldn't do anything about it. Although it was a trap, it was an overt plot. If they weren't convinced, they could compete to obtain materials. Chapter 9:15. After 7 days of discussion, they finally came up with a more detailed plan. Everyone was very satisfied. Ma Hongyu and Su Gongso were very satisfied. They felt that they had fought for the greatest benefits for the practitioners of Great Xia. Bloodsea Demon was also very satisfied. With such an organization, he wouldn't be ganged up on next time. He wondered if he could go and gang up on others. Lin Yu was also very satisfied. The food was good, and she slept soundly. Most importantly, she also discovered a magical product from another world: melon seeds. These days, in the hall where everyone was discussing, there was an upgraded version of the melon seed eating crowd. The melon seed eating crowd. Every day, she would hold a bag of melon seeds with a smile on her face. She would finish it at night, and the next day she would bring another bag. Rinpoche was even more satisfied and smiled every day when he returned to the palace. The only ones who weren't satisfied were probably the Aboriginal officials. They always felt that the other party had taken advantage of them. The first leader was the Empress, and the deputy leaders were Li Fu and Lin Dong. The latter was more unexpected. In fact, he was the most convincing. However, Rinpoche was very optimistic about him. At least, he was the only one among them who had many years of experience in organizing and managing a cult. Ahem. It was his experience in organization management. He had a unique method of brainwashing. At least in Rinpoche's opinion, he was much more useful than Li Fu. As for Li Fu, he was more useful as a signboard. However, with the 3rd, 4th, 6th, 9th, and 10th experts in the world in this organization, Li Fu's signboard wasn't so important anymore. At most, It could only be regarded as icing on the cake. In fact, in Renbaqian's heart, Li Fu had another use. To block the sword. If Su Wuming really came, it would be a waste if Li Fu, the world's #1 expert and the deputy leader of a charity organization, wasn't used to block the sword. Although Renbaqian was confident that he could take down Su Wuming, he had to block the sword first. Otherwise, if Su Wuming attacked him without saying a word, he would die first. In addition, Great Xia was divided into 15 regions, which were under the responsibility of 15 level 1 attendants. They were mainly responsible for recruiting people. If they recruited enough experts, they could be promoted to level 2 or even level 3 attendants. On the surface, Deyo was also divided into 15 regions, which were under the responsibility of some aboriginal experts in Qingyan Swordsmanship. However, everyone knew the situation in Deyo. Just like that, an organization was established in Deyo with all the human experts as its goal. Other than the crowd and the higher-ups of the aboriginals, even the commoners of Lan City didn't know that such a thing had happened quietly. They also didn't know what kind of impact it would have on the future. However, the organization had just been established, and apart from many experts, there was no one else. The rest would be up to the others to pull people. Before that, everyone had another thing to do, which was to go to the 60,000 mountains to investigate the situation of the foreign races, and see if it was as Renbaqian had said. It just so happened that Qi Ziding had recently discovered some traces of foreign tribes in the depths of the 60,000 mountains, and was mobilizing experts. These people were all top-notch experts, so they would be able to get there in less time. They estimated that they would be able to get there in 5 months. In this era, everything was slow. It would take 5 months to get there. A piece of news would stay on the road for months. Thus, Qi Ziding was patient enough to wait for everyone to arrive. Except for 3 people, Li Yuanzhu, Lin Yu and Blood River Ghost. She was going to deal with Su Xianxian. Lin Yu felt that she could eat and drink well in Lan City, and leave the troublesome matters to others. Renbaqian felt that she and Lin Xiaola definitely had a lot in common. Blood River Ghost. Renbaqian already knew a lot of things, so he wasn't interested. However, looking at Blood River Ghost's anxious look, Renbaqian felt that Blood River Ghost was in a hurry to go back and pull people. After all, he had been beaten up by a group of people for half his life, and finally saw a glimmer of hope. Do you see it? Just press this to connect to the public channel, and ask about the other party's situation. At the same time, you can also report the situation through this. Around a table was a circle of experts of all kinds. With this thing, we can communicate with people thousands of kilometers away? Everyone was quite surprised as they didn't expect Deyo to have such a magical item. As Renbaqian adjusted the frequency to the public channel, he soon heard a voice say, "To be honest, I really miss Lan City. I don't know if that little brat has stolen my jar of good wine. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Bring your kid over, beat him up and then send him to me. He's already 20 years old, and still fooling around in Lan City. When I was that age, I already had countless people under me. Forget it, I'm still waiting to hold my grandson. I heard that he's quite close to that girl from the Hong family." "Shiwanya, what did you say?" Another dull and stern voice interrupted. "General-in-Chief who supports the nation. Speaking of which, you picked up a generation out of nowhere. That's your granddaughter, and that's my son. Go ahead and snicker." Shiwanya wasn't afraid of Hongwu at all. "Get lost. Don't let me see you next time. You guys are the most comfortable. I've been catching rats here every day, and my patience is running out. If Zhao Prince Consort hadn't requested Her Majesty to issue an edict, I would have killed until blood flowed like a river. Let's see if those rats could still hide then. Kill, kill, kill. You only know how to kill. What else do you know besides killing? How old are you? Don't you have any brains? Zhui Yu, I'll kill you." The cold voice immediately said angrily. "What did you say just now? You're so old, yet you don't have any brains? Kill, 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 kill. You're more like an idiot." Renbaqian had a strange look on his face. Hongwu, the protector of the north, Zidonglai, the protector of the northeast, Shiwanya, the protector of the south, Li Qianqiu, the protector of the central, Zhuyu, and his own brother-in-law. Was this a voice chat room? There's actually a voice. Gluttonous Duke muttered to himself. The others had complicated expressions on their faces. There were 3 names that came out of the box just now. Shiwanya, General-in-Chief who supports the nation, and Zhuyu. Anyone with a little understanding of Dayo would know what these 3 names represented. These 3 people were in different locations, and no one expected them to be able to communicate directly through this little thing in front of them. Not to mention the few people who were talking to them. Although they didn't say their names, everyone could guess who they were. The 5 protectorates could actually use this little thing to communicate in time. This thing was really convenient and useful. It was no wonder that Dayo had very few defeats on the battlefield in the past few years, whether it was against Great Xia or the invasion of the Yun nation. The coordination of the multiple armies was also perfect. When people looked back and studied the situation, they were surprised that they could actually communicate in time. Ahem, are you guys free today? Has brother-in-law eaten yet? Have you all eaten yet? Oh, it's Zhao Prince Consort. Shiwanya laughed. How has Zhao Prince Consort been? Li Qianqiu also laughed. Zhao Prince Consort, you have arrived. It's a pity that I haven't been able to meet you. When I return to Lan City to report on my work, I will definitely have a good chat with you. Zhuoyu's rather tactful voice came from the radio. Ren Baqian immediately imagined a fatty with a shiny face. This was Hong Wu. This was Zidong Lai. Although these 2 people had different reasons, they both had some opinions about Ren Baqian. Kid, if you dare to mistreat my sister, I will chop you up and feed you to the bugs. Qi Ziding warned from afar. Ha, brother-in-law, how many times have you said that? Ren Baqian laughed. How is that possible? The next second, Qi Ziding's words made Ren Baqian's smile freeze. Why did I hear that you have been flirting with that little girl called Li Yuanju recently? Ren Baqian's eyes widened. Even without looking back, he could feel the strange expressions of the people around him. He didn't want to look back at Li Yuanju's expression. However, he wasn't in the mood to think about the expressions of the others. He was flustered and exasperated. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. When did I ever flirt with that little girl Li Yuanju? Which bastard is spreading rumors about me? Let him explain to me. Otherwise, I will send him off to reunite with his family. The people around Ren Baqian immediately distanced themselves by 5 meters. They looked at Li Yuanju and then at Ren Baqian with subtle expressions. Chapter 9:16. She looked at his back with an uncertain expression on her face. When did I ever flirt with this guy? Also, what do you mean by little girl? For so many years, there were people who called her a Taoist master, and there were also people who called her a fairy. However, this was the first time she heard someone call her a little girl. Moreover, it was someone who called her that in front of her. Was that Qi Zixiao's brother? That butcher from back then? He was thousands of miles away and didn't know he was here. But Zhao Prince Consort. She gently gritted her teeth and heaved a sigh of relief. Her face returned to its original tranquil state. Ren Baqian stomped his feet in anger for a long time. He vowed that he would go and raid Tang Zhinya and Qin Chuan's houses tomorrow. In any case, other than the 2 of them, there shouldn't be anyone else. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he turned to look at Li Yuanju and cupped his fists. I'm sorry, spiritual master. I spoke without thinking. It's nothing. Zhao Prince Consort, you don't have to worry too much about it. This kind of experience is also quite special. Ren Baqian laughed and apologized again before saying, Brother-in-law and Protector General Shi, there will be a group of experts heading to the 60,000 mountains this time. If you find traces of the alien races, don't alert them. This is a very important matter. I estimate that they will arrive in 5 months. Who is it? Qi Ziding asked. You must have heard that in order to fight against the foreign races, Her Majesty has taken the lead and established an organization. These experts are the deacons of the organization. You should have heard of many of their names, like Ma Hongyu, Su Gongso, Lin Dong, Gao Yi, Gluttonous Shihao. Ren Baqian listed more than a dozen names in a row. Humph! These guys. Qi Ziding snorted from afar. If it was back then. Forget it, a hero doesn't boast about his past achievements. Ren Baqian interrupted Qi Ziding's plan to reminisce about the glorious past and said, in any case, these experts are working hard for the human race, so I have to say hello to you first. All right, I got it, Qi Ziding, who had been interrupted, said resentfully. I won't look for trouble with them. The corners of Su Gongso's mouth twitched. If it was the Qi Ziding of the past, he would still have some confidence in his words. However, ever since his leg was broken, Qi Ziding's strength had decreased greatly. Who could he find trouble with? Furthermore, everyone didn't have a good impression of Qi Ziding. Back then, his reputation was notorious outside of Dayo, and many practitioners from the Yun nation had died at his hands. If it was another occasion, it was hard to say who would find trouble with who. Did he really think that they were the same as the martial artists of the Yun nation who had died in his hands? But for Qi Zixiao's sake, it wasn't good to be calculative with him now. However, it would be a different story if he came looking for trouble. He then spent some time teaching these experts how to use the radio station and how to charge it. For those who had never come into contact with this kind of technology, it still took some time. It took a full hour for everyone to master it. During this period, although no one said anything, they were amazed in their hearts. He had seen too many new things in Dayo this time. Whether it was the radio station, the street lights, or the water tower that was being installed in Lan City. Water was pumped through electric pumps to dozens of water towers that were built in Lan City, and then flowed through pipes to each household. Although only Beihong district had been completed, it was said that this water supply equipment was provided to all the people in Lan City. In addition, the ox carts in Lan City also caught their attention. This was because the frames of the carriages in Lan City weren't as bumpy as horse carriages. After understanding them, they found out that the tires of these carriages were wrapped in a layer of rubber, and the interior of the carriages was said to use something called cushioning. Not to mention the potatoes, sweet potatoes, and jacko lanterns all over the streets. Even the poor people could eat their fill. These experiences refreshed these experts' understanding of Dayo. Based on the current situation, Dayo might be able to catch up with Great Xia in some aspects in a decade. These changes were all brought about by Zhao Prince Consort. Given the strength of Qi Zixiao and the aboriginals, coupled with the strange things that Zhao Prince Consort had, it had to be said that Qi Zixiao's foresight wasn't bad. Ren Baqian wondered where she found such a person. When are those people leaving? The Empress asked casually during dinner. In the past, the Empress rarely spoke when she ate. Perhaps she had been infected by Ren Baqian, but she had developed the habit of chatting while eating. Do you dislike them, Your Majesty? Ren Baqian asked with a smile. Yes, the Empress said bluntly. However, I know how to deal with them. In fact, although both sides have been hostile for so many years, these feelings will ease with more interaction in the future. We'll talk about it when the time comes, the Empress said after drinking a glass of wine. Ren Baqian looked at the wine glass in the Empress's hand, rolled his eyes and said, I met Minister Tong and Minister Qin today, and they said that drinking alcohol isn't good for the fetus. Both of them? The Empress looked at Ren Baqian suspiciously. Your Majesty is pregnant with the future Empress of Dayo, so they will definitely be concerned. Ren Baqian laughed. I will talk to them tomorrow. The Empress narrowed her eyes, and a cold glint flashed in them. In any case, I believe in Your Majesty. Your Majesty's understanding of your own body isn't something that outsiders can speculate about. They shouldn't have speculated about Your Majesty's private affairs. Ren Baqian chuckled. Humph. The cold glint in the Empress's eyes intensified. When she looked up at Ren Baqian, the coldness in her eyes eased. Of course I know my own body. Ren Baqian looked at the row of calcium milk beside him. Recently, the Empress had reduced her alcohol tolerance from 2 bottles a day to 1 bottle. He was quite satisfied with this result. The next day, many experts set off with 2 radio stations. A group of winged cavalry warriors accompanied them to avoid any trouble along the way. When Ren Baqian returned to the palace, he saw Tong Jingye and Qin Chuan coming out with bruised noses and swollen faces. When they saw Ren Baqian, They didn't know what to say. Ministers, what's going on? Renbachian asked with a friendly smile. I don't know who told Her Majesty that I was speculating about Your Majesty's private affairs. Could it be Zhao Prince Consort? Tong Jingye asked with an unfriendly expression. What private affairs were the two of you discussing? Discussing Her Majesty is also discussing me. Let me hear it. Renbachian brushed it off completely. Tong Jingye snorted. Could it be that the two of you revealed each other's secrets? Renbachian asked casually. Tong Jingye immediately became vigilant and asked, What do you mean, Zhao Prince Consort? Nothing, just a casual guess. Or did one of you accidentally say something that Her Majesty found out about? However, I'm really curious. What exactly were the two of you discussing in private? Tong Jingye ignored Renbachian's question and snorted. If Zhao Prince Consort wants to sow discord between the two of us, then forget it. Renbachian laughed in his heart. Of course, there was no need to sow discord between the two of them. Sure enough, Qin Chuan immediately turned hostile and said, What relationship do I have with you? On the other hand, my saber wants to build a relationship with you. Why don't the two of you get closer? Tong Jingye's face turned black as he turned around and scolded. If it weren't for your brainless actions, would I have been punished by Her Majesty? You are obviously the one who has been doing shameful things all day long. I am the one who has been implicated. Qin Chuan didn't back down. Seeing that the two of them were quarreling again, Renbachian leaned against the palace gate, took out a bag of melon seeds, and watched the show. In less than a minute, the two of them switched from quarreling to fighting. Qin Chuan used his ultimate technique, the 9 chains, while Tong Jingye retaliated with the 13 chains for a moment. The square in front of the palace was filled with the two of them. Renbachian was helping them count how many floor tiles they had broken. He still had to send the bill to their houses later. Whose corpse was it that was shaken out of the ground by Qin Chuan's kick? Chapter 9:17. After sending off the experts, Renbachian stood on the city wall and watched them disappear into the horizon. He could finally relax. At least such a major task had been completed smoothly. As they descended the city wall, Lin Yu, who had been deep in thought, suddenly made a fuss. Aya, that box of yours can actually talk. The corner of Renbachian's mouth twitched. He turned to look at Lin Yu and really wanted to knock her on the head. However, she was an old monster who had been famous for more than 20 years. Even though she wasn't very smart, he still had to maintain the necessary respect. It would be good if you were an aboriginal, Renbachian said after some thought. Oh, Lin Yu looked at Renbachian and continued to look thoughtful. Renbachian estimated that she would have to wait until tomorrow before asking him why she was an aboriginal. If you were an aboriginal, it wouldn't look so out of place, Renbachian muttered to himself. Aboriginals. It was normal for them to have muscles in their brains, but it was also normal for them to be brainless. Although Lin Yu was considered outstanding among the aboriginals, it was still passable. Oh, Lin Yu continued to look thoughtful. Renbachian ignored her and sighed. How did such a pretty girl have such a brain? He had privately inquired about Xiao Linyue, and it was said that she was quite normal back then. At least not to this extent. Otherwise, it would be impossible for no one to know about her. In the following days, Li Yuanju and Blood-Sea Demon returned to Great Xia. Renbachian was busy with various matters in Lan City, including the entire old city renovation plan, and the preparation of the new city. The renovation plan included the water supply tower and pipelines that were being built to deliver tap water to every household. In fact, this was a very dangerous move. If someone poisoned the water supply tower, in this world where the top experts could form an army, it wasn't impossible. Therefore, the security of the water supply tower was essential. In addition, there was the planning of public toilets and the laying of sewers. For a city that had been built for hundreds of years, it involved a lot of work. Although there were still signs of urinating in Lan City, it was much better than when Renbachian first arrived. It had to be said that sometimes, severe punishment was a powerful way to improve the quality of the people. There was a public toilet every 200 meters, and the soldiers outside the city explained some rules to the aboriginals. As for delivering electric lights to every household, that could only be a wish for the next few years. Coal and rubber were transported from the south, and Dayo's current transportation situation was barely able to meet some of Rinpoche's urgent requirements. Needless to say, it was inappropriate to use it for something like this. From time to time, Rinpoche would see Lin Yu carrying all kinds of things on the street. Rinpoche was puzzled. Why wasn't Lin Yu leaving yet? However, when he thought of this lady's intelligence, he let her be. At night, Rinpoche and the Empress lay on the bed, and Rinpoche plunged into that world in his mind. During this period of time, 2 more planets had formed in the world in his mind. As for the dust produced after the other explosions, it did not meet the conditions to form planets. Now a few nebulae had formed in that space. Somewhere on one of the planets that was half blue and half green, a huge city stood there. The Empress's palace was located in the center of the city. It was originally located on a hill, but this hill was filled with soil and raised by dozens of meters. The palace gate was at the bottom of the hill. After entering the palace gate, there was a straight road. There were 2 shuttle buses that would take the court officials to the palace on the hill. As for the palace complex, Rinpoche combined the palaces in this world with the Forbidden City in his previous life. Every palace was much more magnificent than the original. In addition, the largest area was occupied by all kinds of gardens, which took up more than half of the palace. To Rinpoche, the magnificent palace complex was far less interesting than the gardens and greenery. People who grew up in a city built with steel and concrete probably had this kind of preference. In all 4 directions of the palace, there were plazas that were 200 meters deep. This allowed the imperial guards to stand on top of the city wall and observe the situation in the distance at any time. This also isolated the palace from the city. Outside the plaza was the so-called second ring, which included the residences of many officials and the magistrate offices of most departments. This was the center of Lan City. Further out, the third ring was the residential area for low-ranking officials and the rich. At the same time, there were 2 commercial areas, which were mainly used for large-scale and high-end transactions. The fourth ring was the residential area for ordinary people. In the entire city, buildings with more than 6 stories were not allowed within the second ring. The deeper one went, the lower the building would be. Although the buildings outside the second ring were all 6 stories, Rinpoche believed that with time, this city would also become a city full of steel and concrete. The 2-way 8-lane concrete roads, 5-meter-wide sidewalks, sewer pipes, power supply facilities, subway lines, commercial areas, parks, and landscapes were almost all designed according to modern city standards. After all, Rinpoche had experience in modern society and knew what level a city would reach. Rinpoche's divine sense floated above the city and checked the results he had achieved during this period to see if there were any omissions. He had to admit that the world in his mind was really advantageous in this aspect. He could realize his ideas according to his thoughts and directly see the results. This greatly reduced the cost of trial and error. Rinpoche planned this city based on the population of 3 million. In a short period of time, the city might be very empty. However, in a decade or so, Rinpoche believed that this city would be filled up and expand to the periphery. Until the population reached 10 million. It would become the only super city in this world. As for the problems that limited the size of cities in this era, productivity and transportation, it wasn't a big problem in Rinpoche's eyes. Rinpoche felt a little tired after withdrawing from his sea of knowledge. He turned his head to look at the Empress and found that her eyes were still open. It was actually quite scary to look up at the sky in the middle of the night instead of sleeping. However, the Empress had very little need for sleep. 2 hours at a time or a good night's sleep was enough for her. However, what was the meaning of her beaming with joy in the middle of the night? "Your Majesty, what are you thinking about?" Rinpoche turned over and hugged the Empress while his hand wandered around her body. "The ball in my stomach is talking to me." The Empress looked a little excited. If Rinpoche hadn't entered her sea of knowledge just now, she would have already shared it with him. However, Rinpoche wasn't excited at all when he heard this. Instead, he felt extremely horrified. The Empress had only been pregnant for 7 months. Did Naja in her stomach become a spirit? What did he say? Rinpoche suppressed the panic in his heart and asked in a slow tone. He said he wants to drink. The Empress sat up from the bed. Rinpoche's face twitched and asked, "Is he the one who wants to drink, or are you the one who wants to drink?" "Both. He really told me." The Empress turned to Rinpoche and said seriously. Chapter 9:18. She had just returned from Renwanyan's wedding. Rinpoche had been married for 2 years, in the eyes of his parents, but there was still no news about his grandson. Fortunately, there was someone to share the burden. Renwanyan married a third-year student after they met for a year. The other party's family conditions weren't bad, and they were considered small assets in the country. They were indeed small, with tens of millions of yuan. In the eyes of ordinary people in third-tier cities, they were considered wealthy, but in first-tier cities, they only had 2 or 3 houses. Rinpoche glanced at her. She wasn't considered beautiful, but she had a good personality. She was gentle and had the grace of a Jiangnan woman. In fact, she was a long-legged girl from the northeast. Overall, Rinpoche had a good impression of her. The wedding was also held in his hometown. After the ceremony, Rinpoche returned directly to Wuxia City. No matter what, he could finally heave a sigh of relief now that the firepower had been diverted. At present, the Empress was already 8 months pregnant, but her belly still hadn't bulged. This made Rinpoche wonder if her belly was the same as Doraemon's pocket. No matter how much wine, meat, calcium milk, or how many children she had, the latter didn't count. However, the Empress's condition made Rinpoche doubt whether she could give birth according to the due date. Therefore, after some hesitation, he didn't tell his parents that he was about to have a grandson or granddaughter. "Your Highness, I'm going to film a movie. A production team has invited me." Rinpoche opened his mouth and turned to look at Ning Kaichin, who was drinking coffee. At this time, she was wearing a plain dress, had shoulder-length hair, light makeup, lipstick, and dyed her nails. Compared to her seductive appearance in the past, this outfit was especially attractive. It wasn't impossible for someone to poach her to film a movie with her image. Will it affect the mission? After all, it's too easy for my whereabouts to be exposed after becoming a public figure. Rinpoche frowned. He hadn't cared much about the film and television industry. However, Ning Kaichin had an extraordinary interest in putting herself in front of everyone and letting them see her beauty. "Do you want me to put on some makeup for you? Which female celebrity do you want to see? My figure is much better than theirs. However, my face can be more or less done." Ning Kaichin was in high spirits and wanted to show Rinpoche her skills. "Han Hong," Rinpoche said after some thought. Ning Kaichin's expression froze, and he said gloomily, "You're making things difficult for me." Rinpoche laughed. Ning Kaichin was getting more and more interesting. "Don't worry, it won't delay anything," Ning Kaichin said. Rinpoche thought about it and decided not to interfere too much. She could do whatever she wanted to do. "I heard that the circle is very messy. Just be careful. You have probably forgotten that I am also a sword immortal." Ning Kaichin smiled sweetly in the blink of an eye. "I've never seen a sword immortal with a flying sword that is always sneaky and afraid of heights." Rinpoche mercilessly exposed her. Sure enough, Ning Kaichin's face fell again, and she said resentfully, "Who is to blame?" Rinpoche thought about it and decided to end this topic. The two of them sat for a while longer before someone came in. It was Dingjia. Dingjia, who was now 30 years old, looked rather mature. She gave him a big hug and said, "Boss, you are still so young." He then turned to Ning Kaichin and said enthusiastically, "You are still so beautiful." Although Dingjia knew that Ning Kaichin was originally a man, Rinpoche still felt that he had some intention of knowing that she was a man. It had to be said that Dingjia was a true warrior, and was much braver than most people. However, when it came to age, Rinpoche did some mental calculations and realized that he wasn't much older than Dingjia. The little boy from back then was now independent. After careful calculation, Rinpoche cursed in his heart. It seemed that he wasn't as old as Renwanyan back then, Ren Wanyan was 6 years younger than him. Now that 14 years had passed on Earth from 2017 to 2031, he had aged 7 years while Ren Wanyan had aged 14 years. Ren Wanyan was 1 year older than him? Would there be a situation where Ren Wanyan's son was older than him in the future? Would there be a situation where his grandson was older than him? He couldn't think about this as it would be extremely scary. Boss, what are you thinking about? Your expression is so weird. Do you want to try this? It's a good product. Ding Jie opened the cigar box and took out an Imondo-sized cigar. He then took out a lighter and lit it up before handing it to Ren Baqian. Let's get down to business. Ren Baqian took a puff. He would occasionally touch this thing. Cigars were mainly for tasting and not inhaling like smoking. For many people it was an enjoyment, but for Ren Baqian, it was a snack. Ding Jie took out an electronic device and placed it on the table. Then he sprayed out a thick mist, and a three-dimensional image began to appear in the mist. Ding Jie fiddled with it a few times, and a series of photos appeared on the screen. In the photos were men and women with tall eyebrows and deep eyes. Most of them were in their 40s or 50s. Ren Baqian didn't focus on the country. They're all here. Over the years, they haven't received much attention, but they're pretty good researchers. There are a total of 237 people. Among them, 87 are in physics, 42 are in chemistry, and some are in mathematics, biology, medicine, and flora. Their addresses, hobbies, and detailed information are all here. I have also arranged the immigration routes. Recently, there have been a lot of people smuggling into the country, and the checks are very strict. We have to pay attention to this. Oh, are there a lot of people smuggling into the country? Ren Baqian was slightly surprised. Boss doesn't pay too much attention to these things. Ding Jie wasn't surprised at all. He knew that this boss had a lot of secrets, and that he was always isolated from society, and knew very little about the changes in society. In the past 2 years, there have been more and more people immigrating into the country. In addition to our old brothers, there are also many immigrants from the Western Alliance and the United States. Although some martial arts can be obtained from abroad, they are all ordinary martial arts. As for martial arts that require a certain status, such as those in the military, the police, and the Armed Forces Command, the number of martial arts that can be obtained is decreasing, Ding Jie explained to Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian nodded his head after hearing this. It was reasonable for these things to happen. There were a total of 8 supercomputers that analyzed martial arts, and it was said that the number of martial arts manuals had already exceeded 4 digits. Although many of them had some flaws, there were also many that were more advanced than ordinary martial arts. Some of these martial arts were already much better than the original ones. Moreover, martial arts depended on the person. Some people made slow progress when practicing one type of martial arts, but would make rapid progress when practicing another type of martial arts. Therefore, the more martial arts one mastered, the more attractive it was to talented people. The military and the Armed Forces Command were obviously the best of the best. He turned to Ning Kaichen and said, "His people will cooperate with you. The names on the list are the targets, and the information is in there. You can arrange the order yourself." I promise to complete the mission. Ding Jie gave a military salute. Thank you. Ning Kaichen smiled at Ding Jie. What are you saying? It's an honor. Ding Jie smiled mischievously. Ren Baqian shook his head and ignored the trivial matters between the two of them. Since they were both willing, he would let them be. Be careful. You have appeared beside me many times, and your identity has probably been registered in some units. Ning Kaichen pursed her lips and smiled. Her fingers moved slightly, and a long sword broke through the window. It danced in the air with her fingers and emitted a cold light. Chapter 919. Ding Tong, what did you fill in? An 18 or 19-year-old girl asked another girl. Although I want to continue learning, I don't want to touch algebraic geometry anymore. I'm preparing to enter the Ministry of Works, Ding Tong replied. That's a pity, the other girl said regretfully. Sure you want to continue learning? I'm so envious of you. You're smarter than me. Yagüe values you a lot. Ding Tong said enviously. Yagui values everyone very much. Sure, you expressed his feelings. It's good to enter the Ministry of Works as a rank 8 official. However, the opportunity to learn is even more difficult, especially since we are the first batch. We will definitely be put in an important position in the future. I know. But I really don't want to touch those formulas and diagrams. My chest hurts when I see them. Ding Tong looked helpless. She had been working hard for the past few years, but her results were still below average. Although they only needed to test one's abilities and wouldn't eliminate anyone, she really didn't want to torture herself anymore. Forget it, it's not bad. It wasn't so easy to enter the Ministry of Works in the past. Furthermore, I'm already satisfied with being a rank 8 official. I'm already satisfied enough and can continue learning in the Ministry of Works. Ding Tong felt relieved. In fact, for these commoner children, this was exactly what they wanted. After filling in their application forms, a portion of the students would enter the various ministries to train as low-level officials, while the rest would continue to learn more advanced content. In fact, this caused a sensation among the commoners. Although there were rumors, they were still rumors, and it still caused quite a stir when it actually happened. One had to know that one didn't need to be talented in martial arts to be able to become an official after a few years in high school. This was simply like a cow falling from the sky. Although these students were struggling and vexed, others were scratching their heads in envy. He estimated that after this batch of students graduated, there would be a large number of commoners who would want to send their children to the academy. The next batch of students would need to be recruited again, and it seemed like the academy would need to expand. Currently, 37 out of the 49 students had submitted their future applications. Most of them were the children of officials, and almost all of them had chosen to continue learning. Even if they didn't want to learn, their families wouldn't allow them. For example, Du Laolu wanted to go back and hug his wife. In the end, he was beaten black and blue by his father, and his leg was almost broken. That big treasure made all the Aboriginal officials in Lon City understand one thing: science was power. Although they did not know what science was, they knew what power was. Explosion was power. If these disciples of clans who weren't talented in martial arts were to give up on this path, would they really vanish into the crowd? As for the commoners, half of them were studying, and the other half were reporting to the Ministry of Works. In fact, the Ministry of Revenue was also very envious of this batch of students. Other departments also needed them, but because the number of students was too small, Renbachian still assigned them to the Ministry of Works. After all, the Ministry of Works currently lacked manpower the most. This matter had nothing to do with Tong Jinya inviting him to the brothel for 3 consecutive days. A few days later, the results were finally out. 8 students went to the Ministry of Works, while the remaining 41 students stayed behind to continue their studies. Renbachian was quite satisfied with this result. He had spent the most effort on this batch of students. He really didn't want to see them become ordinary officials of the Ministry of Works, although it seemed like their future was pretty good. As more and more students graduated and more knowledgeable students graduated, they would gradually vanish into the crowd. If they went to the Ministry of Works and gave up on continuing their studies, becoming a rank 6 or 7 official would probably be their limit. Time passed very quickly. After another half a month, it was time for this batch of students to leave the academy. The night before that, Renbachian specially organized a bonfire party at the academy to send them off. Before the party, Renbachian first gave a speech, which was the so-called graduation ceremony. Looking at the people below, Renbachian was filled with emotion. In a few years, he watched these people grow from 16 or 17 years old to about 20 years old. He watched them grow from counting with their fingers to doing addition and subtraction, to 4, 9, and 27, all the way to the level of junior high school graduates. It could be said that the changes in these 3.5 years were huge. I won't say much. I only have one thing to say. Whether you stay in the academy to continue your studies or go to the Ministry of Works, in the future, if you have nothing to do, take a look at the books and don't stop moving forward. If one day, I see you bastards in the academy again, I won't shoot next time. Renbachian stood in front and smiled. Many people below laughed, And a few girls' eyes turned red. After all, they had been classmates for 3.5 years. After today, even though they would still be in Lawn City, it would be completely different. Next, Her Majesty will say a few words to you. What followed was a loud exclamation. Only then did everyone realize that the Empress was actually here. They saw a woman dressed in red walk out of the office and slowly walk to the stage with a faint smile on her face. She was the Empress. "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Greetings, Your Majesty." Everyone greeted her one after another. "There's no need for today. I'm here to see you and nothing else. Your principal has already said what should be said. What I want to say is that you are the first batch of students in Dayo, and I will see how far you can go." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Everyone cheered. How great of an honor was it to be noticed by the Empress? Every student was so excited that they almost couldn't hold back, and wanted to jump up. Alright, next up is the highlight of the day. Renbaqian laughed heartily when he saw the Empress disappear into the darkness after she finished speaking. Behind Renbaqian was a white projection screen, which they had seen quite a few times. This was because robots would usually project content on such a screen when they were lecturing. However, today's content was a little different from usual. As Renbaqian fiddled with the electronic device, the screen lit up. Suddenly, an extremely cheerful and eccentric background music played, as well as the image of Shergan riding his motorcycle and crashing into the wall with a stunned look on his face. This was accompanied by the extremely eccentric March of Spinach. Following that, Tonglan kicked Dulalu away. Then Dulalu flew back and Tonglan kicked him again. He flew back and she kicked him again. Everyone immediately burst out laughing. Shiryu put his hands on his waist and walked like a great Xiao woman. After 3 steps, he fell to the ground. Ha 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 ha. Many students burst out laughing. They didn't expect Shiryu, who usually didn't speak much, to be like this. Shiryu's face turned red, and he covered his small mouth in surprise. When Su Peng and Xiongping fought, Su Peng stepped on Xiongping's body to show off his prowess. He didn't expect Xiongping to pull down his shorts. Fortunately, he still had underwear inside. Su Peng was one of the few Aboriginal men who wore underwear. The reason was that he couldn't urinate properly. However, this underwear had done a great service at this time. However, the problem was that Renbaqian had kindly censored Su Peng's underwear. Everyone watched as Su Peng, whose lower body was censored, stomped his feet in anger. "I still have another layer underneath. I still have another layer underneath." Su Peng shouted from the crowd below, but it was followed by laughter. Tonglan kicked Shergan's buttocks and then dodged. As a result, she didn't pay attention and bumped into a thick tree trunk. Tears came out of her eyes. Tonglan's small face turned red. When did Yagui take this? Shergan, Shiryu Su Peng, Dulalu, Tonglan Ding Tong, Tu Mushing, Pingli Huangdaxian, along with the Spinach March. Every student appeared in the clip. The least was twice, and the most were more than a dozen times. In particular, the scenes of Dulalu being kicked, Tonglan crashing into a tree, Shergan crashing into a wall, and Su Peng's upper body being censored appeared repeatedly. This clip was made up of all the students' dark history. Seeing their own dark history repeatedly appear, everyone's faces turned green. However, seeing that the others didn't run away, some of them felt better. However, those who appeared the most were still full of grief and indignation, and they couldn't wait to rush forward and fight it out with Yagui. It was simply too shameful. This clip was personally done by Renbaqian. He had been busy preparing for this matter for the past few days. It could be said that although this group of students was very stupid, they were the most diligent and favorite. Many years later, when these people became successful and famous, if this clip was released, they probably wouldn't be able to clear their names even if they jumped into the Yellow River. Renbaqian was ready. When the time came, when Dayo had the internet and the Ghost website, he would put this dark history on it. Do you think this is the only time you will be embarrassed? Don't worry, you will be embarrassed for the rest of your lives. How could he not share such a good thing? Along with the cheerful music, many students began to laugh, roast meat, dance, drink, and fight. Until late at night, soft sobbing sounds could be heard from the academy. Chapter 920. Compared to Deo, Great Xia had the kind of society that Rinpoche imagined. Where there were people, there would be grudges, and where there were grudges, there would be killings. In the society, one had no choice. It was better to forget each other than to help each other in difficult times. All kinds of descriptions of society created a dream in the hearts of every Chinese youth. This was especially true in Great Xia. According to the official records, there were a total of 666 sects that still existed today. The various new sects that weren't recorded by the official records were born and died every day. Other than themselves and their relatives, even their enemies couldn't be remembered. It could be said that every sect that could stand tall had gone through a lot of trials and tribulations. Luohua sect was one of the less famous ones. In fact, Luohua sect was famous for a period of time 1,000 years ago. However, following the fall of the sect's higher-ups in a war, the most important part of their Luohua body technique was lost. Since then, Luohua sect, which was originally a first-rate sect, gradually fell to a third-rate sect. It wasn't until the appearance of Su Xianxian, who made up for the missing Luohua body technique, and rose to the top of the list of world experts with his amazing talent. In terms of fighting techniques, Su Xianxian might not even be in the top 50, but his body technique was among the top 3 in the world. If there were people in this world who weren't easy to kill, Su Xianxian could be considered one of them. Such experiences and achievements, coupled with his original temperament, gave Su Xianxian a strong sense of self-esteem and pride. He was like this back in Deo. Rinpoche naturally didn't offend him in any way. He just looked down on him and didn't like him. You're just a gigolo raised by Qi Zixiao. What right do you have to sit with us? What right do you have to regard yourself as the master? Not to mention the letter that tricked dozens of top experts to that remote place. There might have been people who felt the same way as him, but no one was as obvious as him. Or perhaps he was too impatient. 2 hours later, he traveled 300 kilometers. 2 hours later, he was already 300 kilometers away before he took a break. As for offending Qi Zixiao, he merely sneered at her in his heart. Although Qi Zixiao had once infiltrated deep into Great Xia and killed Hua Sanlu, he was not Hua Sanlu. If he wanted to escape, no one could stop him. On the contrary, he tore off Qi Zixiao's face in front of her, and let that despicable person know who he was. This made him extremely happy, and the cultivation that had been stagnant for a long time seemed to have loosened a little, which made him feel even more carefree. This carefree feeling lasted until the next morning, when a mushroom-like cloud rose above the place where he left. Could it be that secret palace? A smile appeared on Su Xianxian's face. I might have to go and take a look. Although he had offended Qi Zixiao yesterday, he just had to be careful. As for the other experts of Deo, they couldn't even touch the hem of his clothes and felt no pressure at all. This time he had to conserve some energy on his return trip, so his speed was a little slower. It took him an hour to return to the area he had been at the day before. However, what he saw was completely different from what he had imagined. Secret palace? In that area, there was only a huge pit, as if a star had fallen from the sky and smashed into it. The edge of the big pit was full of red and black liquid. 5 kilometers away from the big pit, all the way to his front, was scorched black, and the flames in some places had not even extinguished. The air was filled with a burnt smell and a burning sensation, as if one would be ignited if they got closer to the big pit. This is the secret palace of a god? Su Xianxian frowned. Is this the scene when the secret palace of a god opens? Did those people go in? Su Xianxian first investigated the traces of the aboriginals, and found no signs of movement. Furthermore, he saw the figures of other experts in the distance. They didn't go in? Are they waiting? Su Xianxian waited in a secret place near the big pit for a whole day. But not only did he not see those experts who wanted to enter the secret palace, they even withdrew with the aboriginals. This gave Su Xianxian a strange feeling. What exactly happened? What happened? After thinking for half a day, Su Xianxian gritted his teeth, and went deep into the big pit after the aboriginals left. However, he didn't find any signs of the secret palace, only some bright gems at the edge of the big pit. Su Xianxian suspected that these gems had some kind of relationship with the secret palace of a god. He found a larger one and carried it with him. Then he stayed nearby for another 5 days, but those people didn't come back. Occasionally, he would find aboriginal winged cavalry warriors patrolling the periphery carefully. Seeing how cautious the winged cavalry was, Su Xianxian suspected that there was a secret. After staying for a few more days and still not finding any news, Su Xianxian had no choice but to leave. The reason for leaving was that something happened to him that made him a little frightened. Hair loss. These few days, strands of his hair were falling off. In just a few days, Su Xianxian's head was already in a terrible state. Under such circumstances, even if Su Xianxian didn't want to give up, he had to leave temporarily to find a solution. He suspected that he had been poisoned, but when he returned to Great Xia and visited many famous doctors, he didn't find any signs of being poisoned. Instead, his hair continued to fall off, leaving only a few strands of hair on his head. This situation almost made Su Xianxian, who had always thought highly of himself, almost go crazy, but he still couldn't find a solution. Even the famous doctors couldn't find the cause of this situation. Until one day, he inexplicably lost a tooth. Even if a spirit will expert died, he wouldn't lose a tooth. How could such a situation happen? He knew that there was a big problem with him. He had been plotted against. Poison warrior. Rinpochian. How did he know that he would go back? How did he poison him? What a poisonous poison. What a poisonous warrior. He had underestimated him. Feeling a little flustered, Su Xianxian returned to Luohua sect to look for the notes of his ancestors to find a solution. If there was no result, he could only break into Dayo's palace. His first reaction was to go back to the sect to check the notes instead of looking for Rinpochian. Even he didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it, but it was absolutely impossible for him to do so in the past. He didn't know when he had been poisoned, but he was deeply afraid of Rinpochian. He was even more afraid of him than Qi Zixiao. 3 days after he returned to the sect, an indifferent and otherworldly voice of a woman sounded on the mountain peak where Luohua sect was located. Su Xianxian, come out and meet me. This is... Su Xianxian, who was focusing all his attention on the notes, was awakened. He was angry at first, but then realized the identity of the person who came. It seemed to be someone from the rumors, Li Yuanzhu. Wasn't she with those barbarians? Why was she here? He had to meet this person. Su Xianxian's figure appeared outside with a thought. He looked for the source of the voice and saw an otherworldly woman in a Taoist robe standing in front of him, looking at him with eyes full of surprise. Chapter 921. Su Xianxian's current appearance really surprised Li Yuanzhu. Although Su Xianxian's original appearance could not be considered elegant, it could be regarded as ancient and had the demeanor of a scholar. In particular, he had the temperament of a top expert in the world, and his eyes shone brightly. However, the person in front of her now had only 2 or 3 strands of hair clinging tightly to his scalp. His eyes were swollen, and his cheeks were thin. He was full of unhealthy morbidity. His eyes were dim, and he looked abnormally dispirited. It had only been 2 months since they last met. What had happened to Su Xianxian for him to change so much? Su Xianxian's face immediately darkened when he saw Li Yuanzhu's expression. Nowadays, he hated it when others paid attention to his appearance. However, the other party was the 3rd most powerful expert in the world, and he had something to ask, so it was inconvenient for him to flare up. However, at this time, there were more than 2 people present. More than a dozen disciples of Luohua sect rushed out to check on the situation. They were all very surprised when they saw Su Xianxian's appearance, which made him even more irritated. Zhenrenli, what brings you to Luohua sect today? Su Xianxian asked while suppressing the irritation in his heart. Li Yuanzhu was silent for a moment before she said, "Forget it. It doesn't matter how you became like this. I'm here to take your life today." Su Xianxian thought he had heard wrong and asked in shock, "Zhenrenli, what did you say?" It was important to note that she had never killed a single person since her debut. But the purpose of her coming here was to kill him? Li Yuanzhu sighed and said, I'm here today to take your life and your head. Su Xianxian's expression changed drastically, and the others looked even more miserable, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. She was the third most powerful expert in the world. Many people's hearts were pounding even if they were just going against her. Jinrenli, what are you talking about? Is there any conflict between Luohua sect and you? Or is there some misunderstanding? A middle-aged man suddenly shouted. Everyone hoped that it was just a misunderstanding. There is no conflict or misunderstanding. I just have to do this. Sorry for offending you. Li Yuanzhu was not in a hurry to make a move. If Su Xianxian didn't die, everyone in Luohua sect would die. However, Li Yuanzhu couldn't be bothered to give such a reason. Such things might happen again in the future. Regardless of whether the other party hated her or not, she would let them be. Su Xianxian chuckled and said, Li Yuanzhu, we have no enmity in the past. Do you want my life because of the secret residence's treasure? I've already left the secret palace. What kind of secret is it? Even after I've left, you still want to kill me? Luohua sect's secret residence. What kind of secret residence is that even after I left? Everyone from Luohua sect was surprised. Hidden treasures in the secret palace? You want to take my life so you and I are enemies. You guys are so ruthless. That Rinpochian poisoned me to this extent. And you, Li Yuanzhu, who has never killed anyone, wanted to take my life with your own hands. Aja Suchio said. You is you, you, and you. Su sushi. Is. Su of him. Of. Su. Of. Li. However, he was slightly surprised. Was Su Xianxian poisoned by Rinpochian? When? There were so many top experts present, but none of them had discovered him. Furthermore, he was able to cause an expert like Su Xianxian to end up in such a miserable state. His reputation as the poison warrior was well-deserved. Sure enough, he couldn't be underestimated just because he was an earthwill expert. Looks like I'm dead for sure. Su Xianxian laughed in a low voice, but this laughter was a little sad. If it was before, he would still dare to fight. But now, not only did he lose more than half of his hair, there were also some problems with his body. One of the problems was that he had lost a tooth, and it was also something that caught his attention. In addition, the aura in his body was not flowing smoothly. His movement technique, which was originally smooth, was now slightly obstructed. It wouldn't affect him if he was facing an ordinary expert, but he didn't even have the strength to fight back against Li Yuanzhu, who was stronger than him. Su Xianxian laughed bitterly, took out a jade pendant from his bosom, and threw it into someone's hand. Su Dazhong, from now on, you will be the sect master of Luohua sect. Sect leader. The middle-aged man who received the jade pendant was shocked. You have learned more than half of the Luohua movement technique, and the rest is on the jade pendant. You can choose one of your disciples to pass it on to. Don't let Luohua sect fall into a situation where the inheritance is interrupted again. Li Yuanzhu stood there silently, waiting for Su Xianxian to give instructions for his funeral. After Su Xianxian finished speaking, he looked at Li Yuanzhu and said, I have to thank you for allowing me to pass on the sect's inheritance. However, if you want to take my head, it will depend on whether you can do it or not. After speaking, Su Xianxian tapped his feet, and his entire body turned into dozens of figures that shot in all directions. Li Yuanzhu's eyes flashed, and she chased in one direction. If there was no obstruction when Su Xianxian's figure moved, she might not have been able to find his real body so quickly. She was also sure that there was indeed something wrong with his body, and it wasn't a small problem. Sect leader. When the people of Luohua sect saw the two figures disappear into the door, they immediately cried out in sorrow. Li Yuanzhu. More than one person called out this name. An endless grief and indignation rose in their hearts. However, no one knew that Li Yuanzhu had saved everyone in Luohua sect, except for Su Xianxian. Li Yuanzhu didn't want to explain and didn't care about the follow-up. She just followed Su Xianxian from afar. At the same time, she was a little shocked. Su Xianxian was indeed worthy of being the sect leader of Luohua sect. Li Yuanzhu barely managed to keep up with him. And this was under the circumstances that there was something wrong with his body. If Su Xianxian was in his best condition, she might not be able to keep up. The two of them chased and fled for more than half a month. Every time they passed a town, Su Xianxian would release his aura from afar and shout, "Li Yuanzhu, you became a barbarian lackey for the sake of the hidden treasures in the secret residence, and killed the experts of Great Xia. How can you be the third strongest person in the world? You're simply a disgrace to being a son." His voice was like a gust of wind. The people in the town couldn't even see his figure, but they could feel his aura, which immediately caused waves of commotion. After more than half a month, the entire eastern part of Great Xia was in an uproar. Li Yuanzhu saw Su Xianxian's actions from behind, but she was still unmoved. She neither explained nor hesitated, but there was a look of pity on her face. She could feel that Su Xianxian was almost at the end of his rope. As for the tricks of the other party and the comments that were circulating in Great Xia, she neither cared nor was she concerned. Her heart was like an ancient well, without the slightest fluctuation. If others knew about her temperament, they would say, "Scary." A few days later, in the north of Great Xia, Li Yuanzhu stopped in her tracks, and her breathing was a little uneven. Although there was no fluctuation in her mentality, the color of her clothes had darkened. Even she was in a slightly sorry state at this moment. Su Xianxian fell to the ground without any strength left. "Now can you tell me why?" Su Xianxian looked much older than a month ago. His face was covered with many brown spots, making him look like an old man. His eyes were turbid. Nearly half of his teeth were gone. No matter how she looked at him, he looked like an old man with one foot in the grave. Li Yuanzhu sighed. "You've really done something wrong. If you don't die, you won't be able to convince the masses. There are so many experts in the world, and many of them are proud and arrogant. If you are an example, I don't know how many people will die. You're dead, but countless people can live. Although you don't deserve to die, you have to." The more Su Xianxian listened, the more puzzled he became. He struggled to sit up and asked, "What do the experts in the world have to do with me?" Li Yuanzhu told him about the foreign races and the public welfare organization. "It's actually not because of the secret residence?" Su Xianxian looked surprised. "There's no secret residence. It's just a lie. Didn't I say it that day?" Li Yuanzhu shook her head slightly. "I'm not willing." Su Xianxian yelled and spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were wide open, and he stopped breathing. He could never have imagined that he would die because of such a reason. He could never have imagined that these things would happen after he left. He never thought that there would be no secret residence. He had been poisoned, and it was an injustice. Chapter 922. Li Yuanzhu's pursuit of Su Xianxian caused a huge uproar in Great Xia. Even the imperial court and the volunteer army of the Great Xia dynasty, which were in full swing, were affected by this storm. After all, she was the third most powerful expert in the world. While Li Fu and Su Wuming were in seclusion, she was the most powerful person in the world. In particular, Li Yuanzhu had never killed a single person in the past few years when her name shook the world. As a result, everyone in the world held her in high esteem. Almost everyone who had seen Li Yuanzhu felt that she was a fairy-like figure. She was indifferent, aloof, and had nothing to worry about in the world. Although it was right in front of you, it felt like it was looking down at you from the distant horizon. However, it was such a person who had broken his rule of never killing people and chased after Su Xianxian, who was ranked 23rd in the world. These two identities alone were enough to attract people's attention. Not to mention the words that Su Xianxian shouted along the way. It had to be said that Su Xianxian's plan to ruin Li Yuanzhu's reputation had succeeded to a certain extent. Although the content was unbelievable, it made people have more suspicions and opinions about her. Even Shinichi Sek's reputation plummeted. For many days, there was a lot of noise in front of the mountain gate. If she joined the barbarians in the south, it would be a huge blow to the people of Great Xia. The most outstanding and youngest supreme expert in Great Xia had actually sided with the barbarians. How could everyone accept this? Even the scholars who used to regard her as a fairy and supported her the most did not know whether they should continue to believe her at this moment. Runbachian naturally received this news as well. He didn't expect the matter to blow up so much. Fame and fortune. These were the few things that people cared about in life. How many people could really let go of something like reputation? Under such circumstances, Li Yuanzhu didn't explain anything at all. This woman is pretty ruthless. Renbachian smacked his lips. He really didn't expect this young lady to be so decisive. She had completely thrown her reputation aside. However, another piece of information sent to him made his expression darken. On the 15th day of the 9th month, Li Yuanzhu chased after Su Xianxian for 20 days. More than 300 disciples and odd job workers from Luohua sect were all exterminated. All of the dead were either killed by heavy weapons such as maces and iron rods, or chopped into pieces by long swords. The traces at the scene showed that there were at least dozens of people involved. Based on the traces left behind, the identity of the murderer was on the verge of being revealed. After all, other than the Aboriginals, only a few Aboriginals would use weapons like a mace or a metal rod that was as thick as an arm. Using a long saber to chop people into pieces was also a method used by Aboriginal warriors. Furthermore, even though Su Xianxian wasn't in Luohua sect, the remaining people weren't mediocre. There was still a spirit will expert and several earth will experts. Many people could kill them. However, there weren't many people who could do this when dozens of experts were using such weapons and none of them managed to escape. The entire pugilistic world of the Great Xia dynasty fell to a freezing point. All the warriors were filled with resentment. First, Li Yuanzhu had tried to kill Su Xianxian. At that time, Li Yuanzhu had even told Su Xianxian that she would protect Luohua sect. Then the Aboriginal barbarians had destroyed Luohua sect, killing everyone in the sect, including women and children. For a time, the resentment of Great Xia's warriors toward the Aboriginals and Li Yuanzhu reached its peak. No one considered whether someone was trying to frame the Aboriginals. With the reputation of the Aboriginals, was there a need to shift the blame? However, Runbachian knew that he had been F***king framed. Runbachian's face was gloomy, and he didn't know what kind of expression to make. I was F***king staying in Lon City to learn technology, but I was actually framed. That's right, he had been framed. This was because he was in charge of the rearguard commandery, which was in charge of the areas outside of Dayo. Mobilize people to investigate and find out who did it, Runbachian said in a deep voice. Yes, Your Highness. By the time Runbachian received the news, half a month had already passed. During this half a month, batches of experts had gone to Luohua sect to check on the situation. Even if there were any clues, they would probably be gone by now. However, they had to investigate. The other party didn't just want to destroy Luohua sect. Obviously, the other party's target was either Li Yuanzhu or Dayo. Runbachian felt that the latter was more likely. After all, Li Yuanzhu originally had an excellent reputation in Great Xia. Although she had caused an uproar recently, no one would make a move on her so quickly. In that case, the other party's target was Dayo. What was the other party's purpose? What was the other party going to do? Now was the time to establish a new organization. Once that batch of experts returned from the 60,000 mountains, it would be time to recruit them wantonly. If the hatred between the practitioners of Dayo and Great Xia was stirred up, there would be many twists and turns. Well, there was actually a lot of hatred. Back when Great Xia attacked Dayo, a large number of martial artists from Great Xia died in the warrior camp. However, it was different this time. In particular, the other party was still hiding in the dark. This was only the first time that Luohua sect had made a move, and they might do something else. Under such circumstances, they couldn't be left alone. Pass down the order. Don't let go of even the slightest clue. Report back immediately if there is any information. Runbachian was afraid that his subordinates would be negligent, so he repeated the order. Rest assured, Your Highness. Runbachian nodded and put the 2 pieces of information in his arms. After leaving the rearguard commandery, he squinted his eyes with a faint smile on his face. First, he went to the Ministry of Works to look for Tong Jinya. Principal. A young and tender voice sounded very familiar. Runbachian turned his head. and saw that it was a student who had just graduated from the academy. He was wearing the uniform of the Ministry of Works, and still looked young and inexperienced. Renbaqian smiled and chatted with him for a while. Although he called him Yagüe every day in the academy, he was very respectful toward Renbaqian after leaving the academy. These students who entered the Ministry of Works were all technical officers, and were highly valued by Tongjingye. Although they were still young and inexperienced, things were going smoothly. Renbaqian was relieved after hearing this. He forced himself to say a few words, and went to look for Tongjingye. The main reason was that the road between Lan City and the Yun Nation had collapsed during the rainy season, burying nearly 100 prisoners of war. Tongjingye didn't take it seriously. Although there weren't many collapses like this, it was normal for people to die. However, Renbaqian was very concerned about it. Deaths were one thing, but what if there were more collapses in the future? After arguing with Tongjingye for a long time, they finally decided to send 2 student officers to the scene. This was also a form of training for them. If they could solve the situation there, it would prove their ability and the effectiveness of Black Bamboo Academy's education. Back in the palace, the Empress was holding a large bucket of calcium milk and drinking it non-stop. Qingyuan and Hongyuan were still pouring the milk into the bucket. Although the wine pool hadn't been formed yet, the Empress's bucket of calcium milk had already appeared. Seeing Renbaqian, the Empress thought of the wine pool and meat forest and asked lazily, "Where's my wine pool?" Recently, the Empress had been getting more and more lazy, and he wasn't sure if it was because of her pregnancy. However, it had already been 10 months, and the Empress's belly was only slightly bulging, which couldn't be seen when she wore clothes. As for labor, there wasn't any movement at all. Renbaqian was already very calm about this, and was afraid that the Empress was really going to give birth to a Naja. "Your Majesty, the new city has already started construction. Let's put the wine pool in the new palace," Renbaqian said. "You are getting more and more fooling me." The Empress snorted. Renbaqian smiled bitterly. It wasn't easy for her to change to calcium milk. Wouldn't she revert to her old ways if she was given a wine pool now? He casually showed the 2 pieces of intelligence to the Empress and told her about it as an interesting story. "Your Majesty, we have been framed." The Empress glanced at them and said, "It's their business to think what they want. We just have to do our own thing. The Aboriginals in Great Xia have always had a lot of enmity, but so what? If they really block the way, just kill them." Renbaqian spread his hands and said, "Are all experts like this? Your Majesty is like this, and so is that little girl Li Yuanju." Renbaqian did it on purpose. When he talked about Li Yuanju in such a frivolous tone, the Empress wouldn't suddenly become inexplicably jealous. Sure enough, as he expected, the Empress didn't care at all and said, "Under the general trend, no matter what they do, it's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot and won't be able to affect the overall situation. You should set your sights higher." Renbaqian knew that the Empress was right, but he was still used to being as meticulous as possible. Chapter 923. Other than being framed and being made a scapegoat, everything else went smoothly. Except for the last 2 sections of the cement road from Lan City to the Yun Nation, the rest of the road had been built. It was expected to be completed in another 4 months. With this road, the travel time between Lan City and the Yun Nation could be reduced by half, and a lot of manpower and material consumption could be reduced when transporting supplies. Renbaqian had already started to prepare for the construction of the second official road. He originally envisioned that the second road would be from Lan City to Tiesua Pass, which was originally an important border town of Great Xia, and was now the location of the Protectorate of the North. However, Renbaqian now planned to build the official road from Lan City to the Protectorate of the Southeast. This was the only way to transport large amounts of coal and rubber. The transportation of large amounts of resources was the most important thing now. Since Great Xia couldn't take care of itself and couldn't take care of the South, the road to the Protectorate of the North wasn't that meaningful. The Zhang family from the Yun Nation had recruited a large number of people to Lan City. In particular, These blacksmiths from the Yun nation had brought a lot of new technology to Dayo. Although Runbachian directly took out the blast furnace and hydraulic forging equipment, these indigenous methods of the blacksmiths from the Yun nation played a great role in many areas and greatly improved the smelting standards of Lan City. The improvement of this technology could be seen from the layers of beautiful satin patterns on the swords and knives on the market recently. The most important thing was that the first diesel internal combustion engine prototype was finally successfully produced after many explosions. Although it was still a little crude and needed to be improved and reduced over the generations, this was expected. The most important point was that Dayo had produced the first diesel internal combustion engine, which meant that the craftsmanship and materials had met the basic requirements. This was what Runbachian was concerned about. However, Runbachian discovered a bad sign. At present, the goal of the group of rascals from the Black Bamboo Academy's first year of high school seemed to be a little off. They seemed to be more interested in researching how to make the internal combustion engine explode more violently. This could be seen from the recent explosion accidents at the Diesel Internal Combustion Engine Research Institute. Although the principle of the internal combustion engine was to generate power through explosions, Runbachian had to raise his gun and shoot for another 5 minutes as a warning when a wall of the research institute was blown up. However, this group of bastards had learned to move like a snake now. After more than half a month, Runbachian finally saw Li Yuanju, who had returned. The head you wanted. Li Yuanju, who was dressed in a Taoist robe, placed a box on the table. I did what I promised you. But what about Luo Hua sect? I have been framed. Runbachian smiled bitterly. This matter really has nothing to do with me. If I wanted to, I wouldn't have agreed to it back then. Directly using a nuclear bomb would be the most effective deterrent. Since I've promised you, there's no need to do anything unnecessary. Li Yuanju nodded and said faintly, I think so too. You wouldn't do such an unwise thing. Are there any clues? No, we got the news too late. We couldn't find any clues at the scene. Moreover, the other party stopped after attacking once. Now we can only wait for him to attack again. Li Yuanju thought for a while and said, recently, there has been a lot of discussion about this in Great Xia. This time it's different from Qi Zixiao destroying the 9 pavilions. The 9 pavilions had a bad reputation, and many people resented them. Although there were some people who complained about it, there were also many people who applauded it. The impact of this matter was more about Qi Zixiao being able to destroy the 9 pavilions alone. However, Luo Hua sect is completely different this time. All the sects reacted very strongly, probably feeling sympathy for the loss of their own kind. If the aboriginals can do whatever they want in Great Xia and wipe out an entire sect, Luo Hua sect will become them tomorrow. They are in Great Xia, but they have to worry about the aboriginals. Do you understand this feeling, Prince Zhao? I understand, but this matter can't be explained clearly, and no one will listen. We can only wait for the murderer to appear again. Xinrenli, have you been affected? Runbachian asked. It's fine. You don't have to think too much, Prince Zhao. Li Yuanju replied faintly. Runbachian nodded and said, if Zhenyi's sect encounters any trouble, we can move to the Yun nation. We share the same roots and culture as Great Xia. Li Yuanju glanced at Runbachian and said, Prince Zhao, you have underestimated our Zhenyi sect. If we run away when we encounter trouble, Zhenyi's sect won't be able to survive for nearly 1,000 years. Runbachian laughed it off as it was just a suggestion. If Zhenyi's sect really moved to the Yun nation, he would welcome it. However, the possibility was almost zero. Li Yuanju looked indifferent, but she was actually quite stubborn. You have worked hard, Xinrenli. Runbachian opened the box and saw a person's head that had been salted with lime. His face could still be vaguely seen. However, Runbachian was a little surprised. Su Xianxian? It was Prince Zhao who poisoned him. Are you still surprised? Li Yuanju's tone wasn't dissatisfied, and she spoke very casually. Poison? Runbachian was even more surprised. When did he poison him? He was already poisoned before I went. Prince Zhao is surprised. Could it be that you didn't poison him? Li Yuanju was a little puzzled when she saw Runbachian's reaction. Rinpoche frowned and shook his head. I didn't poison him. It seems that the murderer has been eyeing Su Xianxian for a long time. However, Su Xianxian is the 23rd most powerful expert in the world. How could he be targeted so easily? The other party's strength seems to be unexpectedly strong. Li Yuanzhu closed her eyes slightly, opened them a moment later, and said, no matter who they are, they will eventually give themselves away. Rinpoche didn't know about Su Xianxian's experience. He didn't know that Su Xianxian had stayed in the center of the nuclear explosion for 10 days, and even carried a large piece of glass from the explosion with him. He only lost his hair and had some problems, but he was already considered a strong spirit will expert. If he were an ordinary person, he would have died more than once. However, Su Xianxian thought that it was Rinpoche who poisoned him and naturally wouldn't say what he had done. Li Yuanzhu thought that it was Rinpoche who poisoned him and naturally didn't ask any more questions. Rinpoche knew that he hadn't poisoned Su Xianxian, but Su Xianxian had been poisoned. He subconsciously thought that someone had done something behind the scenes, and didn't think that Su Xianxian had stayed in the center of the nuclear explosion for too long, and was affected by the radiation. An inexplicable misunderstanding occurred just like that, causing Rinpoche to overestimate the strength of the mastermind. Rinpoche thought for a moment and said, besides Su Xianxian, there seemed to be 2 other people in the vicinity that day, but they didn't show themselves. If Su Xianxian was targeted, then someone must have known about what happened at that time, which led to the series of events that followed. Those 2 people were the most suspicious, and it wasn't impossible for those who joined the Go Home organization to be involved. Rinpoche felt that he should start with those 2 people, but he had to pay attention to the others as well. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving to take a look at the 60,000 mountains. Give me that radio station of yours if you have more, Li Yuanzhu said. Rinpoche naturally agreed to this request. After sending her off the next day, Rinpoche learned the identities of those 2 people from the experts who went to the 60,000 mountains. Miao Yulong, the fallen phoenix hairpin, and Ruan San, the water dragon king. It just so happened that these 2 people had enmity with the aboriginals. The former's good friend was killed by Hong Wu, while the latter had 1 ear and 1 eye cut off by Qi Ziding. Following the order, the embroidered uniform guards in the rear guard commandery began to investigate the 2 people. On the other hand, Rinpoche had to return to Earth to pick up a group of 11 people, including 6 physicists, 2 chemists, 1 zoologist, 1 botanist, and 1 mathematician. This group of people was Ning Saichen's harvest these days. They would be the first batch of high-end talents in this world. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.